Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Put the children to bed. It's time for Dan and Aldo to bare their souls.
Oh, yeah!
I love the Chicago Bears more than I do masturbating, and that is a lot.
Woo! And I love me some Dan Aguire. Then, with 3 seconds left, Bob Avellini throws a 30-something yard touchdown pass to Greg Latta, and the Bears win, and I literally shit my pants. I swear to God, I literally did. It wasn't the first time.
Eric Kramer, for me, I love the guy. He's a tragic figure. I mean, he embodies all that is.
I love Eric. If they don't run the ball here, I'm going to vomit. I swear to God. They ran.
Look, I don't mean any disrespect. He just didn't play that well. Not for a guy of his caliber.
Ooh, I wonder who he's talking about. You know, they won, but I'm going to be miserable all week because they stunk. I'm miserable all the time.
I don't really have any recollection of that at all, but I guess perhaps I blacked it all out.
I've been known to black out too. So Dan, tape is the ultimate tool for scouts and for coaches to evaluate players, to detect plays and so forth. And they spend hours looking at tape, right? Why do they so often get shit wrong?
Ladies and gentlemen, Dan and Aldo.
Oh, yeah! We got a Bears win in week 1. Dan and Aldo will bare their souls for the next 60, 90, 120 minutes. I'm not sure how long this show is going to go, but at least I remembered the title. Dan and Aldo bare their souls. Listen to the applause, Dan. It's all for you. How are you, my friend?
I am well. How about you, sir?
I am doing great. You know what? Sometimes when the Bears lose and look ugly, it makes me feel really bad all week, like I said in the open. But this week, I've been feeling good. And I think it has a lot to do with the unusual circumstances of week 1, you know, playing in a pandemic, no preseason, all of those factors. So I've been excusing a lot of the poor play and just really happy that they had a strong fourth quarter, offense and defense, and that they got a win. How do you feel?
Well, not to tug on my own cock, but last week I did say that I thought that the defense would probably struggle in week 1. And I thought my justification at the time was it's going to be hard to have your conditioning down without a preseason. You haven't hit anybody. You haven't even really hit yourself when they're practicing against the offense. And then suddenly it's a live go and there's no crowd there. There's no blood flowing. And it's just suddenly it's go time, you know, without a lot of buildup. So I don't want to say I give the defense a pass because as we talk, I will be very critical of the defense because I always am. And I know that's an unpopular opinion. I'll extrapolate on that real quick first. Mm-hmm. People, when they criticize Mitch, and he deserves a lot of criticism. I'm not saying that he doesn't. Mm-hmm. But they'll be like, you know what? Stats are for losers. And when Mitch had those 300 yards against the Saints or whatever, they'd be like, it was because they were down so far, so they're skewed and those stats don't matter. But those same people will cite defensive stats all the time, like, well, the Bears were top 5. They're top 5 defense. No, they're fucking not. They do not pass the eye test. Remember 2018? We're going to be talking about the Giants today. What happened in that game? We had a dramatic comeback, and the defense blew it as soon as they went to overtime. Nick Foles in the playoff game. Just get a stop. Just get us a stop. The defense blew it. How many times have we said that? Even last week against Detroit, when Mitch led the heroic comeback, you can say it's because of Matt Patricia. You can say it's because of the cover one, you know, whatever. However, the job he got, he performed well. He led the comeback, 3 touchdowns, and the defense still allowed Detroit to go straight down the field again. But again, I'm not unhappy for you say, well, the running back dropped a pass. That's the only reason you won. But you know what? We lost a game on opening day 3 years ago when Jordan Howard dropped a touchdown against the Falcons, and nobody was telling Atlanta that win didn't count. So no one's going to tell me this win doesn't count. It's just like, and I'm going on a rant. I'm sorry.
I love it.
But that game in 2010 on opening day when everyone cites, the Calvin Johnson play, the Bears didn't deserve to win that game. I always said, fuck no, we deserve to win that game because in 2004 at Ford Field, Bernard Berrien had the same fucking play from Chad Hutchinson, caught the pass, and they said it wasn't a catch, and they took the game away from us. Nobody remembers that because it's the 04 Bears. It was week 16, and we were 4-10 or whatever. Mm-hmm. But the Calvin Johnson play happened to us in 04 with Barry. And so when it happened to them, I was like, fuck, man, karma comes back at you.
There you go.
And so again, we lost with Jordan Howard on 3rd and goal. Remember, the Bears had 1st and goal from the 5. Mm-hmm. Mike Glennon led them all the way down the field. The only positive thing he did in his tenure against the Falcons, they were defending NFC champions. 1st and goal from the 5. We do not win because Howard dropped a touchdown pass. So this kid, I don't even remember his name, from Detroit drops a pass. Fuck it. It comes back. It helps us. I'm happy is the short answer. We are 1-0, but I'm concerned in a lot of areas, of course.
There are a lot of reasons to be concerned. There is no doubt about that. We're going to dissect them. But first, what I want to do is play a little audio that you collected over the first 2-3 days of the week based on your radio habits. Anything else you want to share with us before I play this?
No, to set it up, I was just trying to because I will never pretend that my opinion is superior to anybody else's or that I'm right, because my opinion at the end of the day is just simply my opinion. And I do value yours or anyone else that disagrees with me on the Bears. I mean, there are a lot of, I could be condescending, I guess, in a political sense sometimes. But so I did want to hear what the quote unquote experts were saying. And most of the people, again, disagreed with me. They didn't view this favorably at all, as you will hear. But I bounced around. We got Wani. We've got from The Score. We've got some David Kaplan and Jay Hood from ESPN. Who else did I put in this? Maybe some Waddle and Sylvie. Yep. So you'll see just kind of a hit and miss of what people were saying the first couple of days.
There you go.
It was a gut-wrenching football game to watch, but you get on that plane, somehow, some way, you're 1-0.
That's why there's 4 quarters in a football game. The resolve of the Bears was so impressive yesterday, Cap.
I think the best when the Bears fell behind, when the Lions came out the 3rd quarter and scored, and would they make it a 17-point game, that was almost the best thing that could have happened because the Lions had 3 starting corners out, right? They had 2 out before the game, and they lose another one. When you get in that situation, I've been there. I would call it cat coverage. It's street ball, you know what I mean? And that's the simplest way to play defense. If you go out there and try to play zone, and you got to make a check from a 2-deep zone to a 3-deep zone because of a motion on offense, and you got players like Detroit had in there that hadn't played much, you're going to have big plays. Matt Patricia did the right thing. Mitch, he knows the coverage. It's cover 1. And now he's capable of getting the ball to the correct person. So I think being behind really helped him right now.
We all agree they should have lost. They should have lost the game multiple times. They should have lost at the end when Swift dropped the football in the end zone. But the fact is they won. And in an NFL season, my experience has been covering the NFL all these years, is that every team that wins a Super Bowl or makes the playoffs has to have some lucky breaks along the way.
Yep.
Now, I am not in any way saying that what we saw yesterday, I'm not going to carry that over and say the Bears are on their way to the playoffs. I'm not going there. However, I will tell you that luck and football go hand in hand. You can't be good unless you're lucky.
Olin, from your perspective, and I know you probably haven't got a chance to study it maybe yet, but what did you think about the offensive line in sort of reconfiguration with Whitehair and Daniels and then adding Effetti to the mix?
I thought they played really well. I thought watching them, they worked well together. They held it well. They opened up a lot of holes. Like I mentioned earlier, very interesting that the defense, the Lions decided to play almost just giving them, not giving them, you have to earn it, but kind of giving them the run game and not putting an extra big body on the field. Instead, trying to stay in nickel, even with all the injuries they had in the secondary, just trying to stay with an extra defensive back on the field versus the Bears. But they did really, really good in pass blocking, and Mitch was clean most of the game except for the sack fumble he took late in the fourth quarter.
To be honest, Jonathan, the defense sucked. It was awful all day long, whether it's Adrian Peterson gashing him for 19 yards on his second carry and watching the game with Olin, Alex Brown, and Lance Briggs, and two defensive guys in there were just blown away how bad that defense was.
They looked unprepared. There is no doubt. They looked unprepared for the moment. And I thought that Stafford's uniform was too clean in the game.
About that in the context of how the Bears defense played, I sure hope that it's more about them being out of shape or them needing the game than it is a sort of conclusion as to where they're going to be at defensively. I was hoping they'd be more 2018 than 2019, and I don't know what that was.
That was probably a disappointment, and I was texting with Chucky Pagano after the game, and you know what he said to me? He says, if you haven't had any real live competition, the one running back that you don't want to have to tackle right off the bat is Adrian Peterson. You know what I mean? He is a big, powerful guy, you know, completely different than a Tariq Cohen, for example. And so I think the physicality, that the lack of preseason games, I think showed up a little bit on their defense, and they've got enough ability. Obviously, we all know that. I thought that Roquan Smith played great. He looks like he's getting back to where he was. So I thought there were some real good individual efforts out there from a defensive standpoint. But as a unit, they just weren't that sharp, obviously, and they didn't play physical enough. You can't get the ball run on you for 150 yards. That's a disaster.
Brad Biggs of the Chicago Tribune, if you're just getting into your car, wrote today, the headline reads, Allen Robinson didn't just remove the Bears from his social media accounts, he has to be traded. Biggs writes, star wide receiver Allen Robinson removed mentions of the Chicago Bears from his Twitter and Instagram accounts Tuesday, presumably because he's frustrated at a lack of progress toward a contract extension. The divide between Robinson and the Bears runs deeper than that, though, as a league source told the Tribune, that Robinson has asked about a possible trade. So what does that mean? It runs deeper than more than just the negotiations. Dan Wiederer joined us last hour. He believes all of these little things have accumulated on A-Rob, that he wants the money, but he also knows, just like every time he doesn't get hit in stride, that should be a touchdown. And you mentioned when you were talking about Keenan Allen, that the numbers could go up for A-Rob, and he gets more respect from the Ryan Clarks and Trey Wingos of the world. It goes into his mind, and he regrets it. And he showed Dan showed us a play from 2019 where A-Rob was breaking free, wide open, with his arm up in the air, and was really frustrated when he got into the end zone, and that pass never came.
This is breaking news.
We got an old-fashioned source-off on our hands, boys.
Whoa, what's a source-off?
Adam Schefter is saying that Brandon Parker, the agent for Bears wide receiver Allen Robinson, said he and his client have not requested a trade. However, Robinson, who is in the last year of his contract, is unhappy that Chicago has been unwilling to pay him market value for wide receivers.
Source-off.
We got a source-off!
Look, both of those reporters, Brad Biggs and Adam Schefter, are as good at what they do as anybody.
I still think it gets done. At the end of this, we can have a source-off. We can have a sword fight. We can do whatever you want.
No, I don't want a sword fight. No,
but I think at the end of the day, this deal gets done. It just makes sense. Follow your common sense gauge, barometer, I don't know, yardstick, whatever it is. Follow whatever leads you. Sword. Follow your common sense sword.
Our thanks to ESPN 1000 and 670 The Score Sports Radio for those clips, and great job of cutting that together, Dan Aguire. There is an awful lot to unpack there, isn't there?
Yeah, the first thing that jumps out at me when Wani was the only person that I heard that defended Matt Patricia. Maybe that's coach speak, and coaches are in a fraternity, and they're always going to defend the other coach. But everybody else vilified him. What do you think?
I think that Matt Patricia is about as stubborn as they come when it comes to coaches. He reminds me a lot of Lovie Smith. In that he's got a way of doing things and he's going to stick to it, whether no matter what the evidence is. It's kind of like the definition of a bigot, right? It's you present all sorts of evidence to somebody and they still say, well, I don't care. I feel this way. And that's Matt Patricia. God bless him. I met him down at the Senior Bowl. He's a super sweetheart of a guy in person, but boy, oh boy, as a football coach, frankly, I'm glad he's not flexible, but I'm not a big fan of him as a head coach. That's for sure.
That's exactly my criticism. If we were going back in time right now, if we were doing this podcast in circa 2011, I would be saying the same thing about Lovie. I was like, God, I think Lovie's a good man and I like him and I want to root for him, but we're always in the cover too, even when our personnel doesn't match it. Mm-hmm. It's like you don't have, Charles Tillman at his prime and Nathan Vasher the couple of years that he was really good. You've got different personnel and he couldn't adjust. I think that same criticism toward Matt Patricia is so exactly what I didn't like about Lovie, just the inability to be flexible in any scenario. So I thought that comparison you had was perfect. Well, yeah, Patricia's a rocket scientist, so I will never call him unintelligent.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. No, he's a good football coach in many, many respects, but there are just certain qualities that I think you need to possess as a head football coach, and one of them is flexibility, and I don't know if he has that quality.
Well, I concur.
Well, I'm glad you concur. All right.
The best part about the run game, if you don't mind me starting there.
No.
I love I apologize. I was drinking some soda. A lot of people like coffee. I'm more of a Coca-Cola guy. But
you like that sugary caffeine at 9:36 p.m. on the East Coast?
Yeah, but I'm at work until 8 a.m.
That's
Eastern.
Right.
So, yeah, but David Kaplan told me on the phone once, he said that it was a placebo, a complete mental thing. Like, I don't really need that for my boost. And perhaps he's right, but I don't smoke cigarettes. I don't do any drugs. This is my drug. So.
We all have our vices.
Exactly. The main thing I thought early on, and again, I will never pretend to be the guy that's analyzing the film and being an expert. I'm not Greg Gabriel to come down and tell you about the personnel or anything. But just as a novice, as a fan watching, I really enjoyed seeing the Bears run with Mitch behind the center and mixing in play action. I really, really have grown to hate the shotgun. I thought the shotgun was great, in the history of like football with Staubach and Landry. But when you're on first and goal from the 2 and you're in the shotgun, that really pisses me off. And then that didn't really start until Kaepernick and Russell Wilson burst on the scene circa 2012, to where you have to be in the shotgun every situation. So I like that Nagy seemed to twist that up a little bit, and it was had Mitch under center, even though they scored their points. Conversely, later on, when he was running out of the pocket and stuff, at least it looks like they did work on this and did make adjustments in the offseason.
Totally agree with that. The analytics say that last year they ran out of the shotgun, they lined up in a shotgun formation for about 75% of their plays and 25% under center. In week 1, it was almost a 50-50 split. And so that is great to see. And in listening to Matt Nagy and Mitch Trubisky earlier in the week in their press conferences, they said this was something that they self-scouted themselves, the 2019 tape. And what they realized is that out of the under center formation, they had a lot of explosive plays, and it helped disguise a lot of the things that they were doing. And Tariq Cohen mentioned it again today. He said he loved the fact that they were playing more under center because it added the element of surprise. And clearly, that's one of the things that we talked about last season is their play calling and it was predictable and that the defense knew what was happening. And on Sunday against the Detroit Lions, playing under center more often really, really helped in that respect.
And the line just, and again, maybe it's an aberration, and maybe it's because Detroit seemed to be in nickel the majority of the game. And you should, on paper, be able to run when you're taking out a defensive lineman and bringing in an extra back, a defensive back. You should be able to run against that formation. But nonetheless, I don't think they could have last year. I mean, I felt like the other team could be in a fucking dime and the Bears still would get 1 yard or lose yards on a carry. So I thought that the offensive line, again, I'm not going to pretend to be Joe Bugle. I think he passed away. Maybe I shouldn't have referenced him. or the Castillo, our new offensive line coach. I'm not some expert, but it looked like from the novice eye that the offensive line was just superior in comparison to anything we saw in 2019.
Well, let's listen to what Matt Nagy, a much more experienced and professional eye, said about his offensive line.
Yeah, they're just keeping their heads down and listening to what they're taught. Again, I have a history with Juan. I know how he teaches. I know what he expects with the details in practice. I know how he treats them off the field in regards to making sure that they understand the compassion that he has for them as people. And then you see that when you're out there. He's going to work them hard. They're still going to get better. There's a lot of room for improvement. You can see on the back end of some of these runs, there's some cut blocking that's going on. And I think we'll only get better at that as the year goes on. We couldn't cut our own guys in training camp. So each game, that's something for y'all to look at and just kind of see if you get a feel for it. But so far, that week one was pretty good. We just got to keep it going.
Well, that is encouraging to hear that, some of the things that they did on that football field weren't to perfection because they couldn't do those things in training camp. And so hopefully as the weeks go on, they will get better. Now, I have to single out, me, I've got the reputation of being the guard father because I love the play of the interior of the offensive line, because in today's NFL, you really need a strong interior offensive line because passes are going out faster. In other words, to nullify the pass rushers who are coming in out of the edge rush, you need to get the ball out quickly. And so the days of a 5, 7, 9-step drop, I remember some quarterbacks dropping back 9 steps. Those days are over with. It's now getting the ball out quickly for 80% of your plays. And so what is happening is defensive coordinators rush up the middle. And so you need a great center, you need great guards, and I think that the Chicago Bears, after week one, analyzing their play, the interior of the offensive line, I was very, very impressed, and very impressed with Jermaine Ifedi. I think that part of the reason they ran well was because of his big fat ass. I mean, this guy's got a huge ass, and he used it effectively in getting downfield and blocking linebackers.
Yeah, and everyone seemed to, again, the experts seem to all praise James Daniels too. And I'll confess, I wasn't focused in on one lineman versus another, except whenever a play would break down, like when Mitch fumbled late in the game. Of course, I noticed that Leno was the one who dove on the ball, and thank God for that. Because if the Lions recover there, the game is probably over. So, yeah, I noticed individual plays like that, but I wasn't sitting around and analyzing the guard play on any given run. And I was just watching the live TV copy, too. I didn't watch the All-22. I just don't have the time. But, yeah, if you say the right guard is playing well and everyone's saying the left guard's playing well, as a whole, I saw Pro Football Focus said that the Bears, and I know everyone kind of shits on them, and probably rightfully so, but I saw that they acknowledged that the Bears were the best offensive line collectively in running the ball in week one. That is like a dream come true. Again, I'm not I'm not John Fox. I'm not, let's run the ball 50 plays a game. But I mean, damn it, there's got to be some middle ground between that and Matt Nagy from last year.
Yep, I'm totally with you. And, I think that, and I've said this before, I'll say it just one more time. Maybe I'll throughout the season. I'll say it a few more times. But I really do believe that the biggest acquisition the team made to help the offensive line was not a player, it was Juan Castillo. And so you really need to have a coaching staff that is working in unison. And I don't think Harry Houston stopped being a good offensive line coach. I think he did tremendous work at Notre Dame and produced.
And the Bears during their Super Bowl run,
Exactly. So this guy is a good coach, but I think that the marriage between Nagy and Houston just did not work, and so we started to see that. And so there probably was some friction as to where to play James Daniels, whether to put him at center or to put him at guard. There was some, Houston was in charge of the rushing attack, and I think Houston kind of blamed Matt Nagy for some things, and Nagy blamed Houston and so forth. But so he got his guy. He got a guy that he's familiar with, Juan Castillo, and so far, so good. I'm really, really very happy about that. And we need to have that happen again in week 2 because we've seen this happen so many times, you and I, and you remember it a lot better than I do, is, there's some success in one game, and then all of a sudden you wonder, what the hell happened? They're not running the ball like they did last week. Oh, my goodness. All of a sudden, the lessons learned are lost the following week.
Well, I can remember that within a game last year, that Charger game.
That's right.
They had a terrible first half. They're booed off the field. They come out in the second half with like a 13-play drive running out of the I formation, score a touchdown, and then get away from it the rest of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, he's stubborn, man. And I can't speak for the former offensive line coach, but perhaps Harry was thinking, you know what, maybe we could run the ball better if we'd get the fuck out of the shotgun every play. So, again, maybe Nagy, not to belabor that point, but perhaps Nagy learned from that. Maybe he actually listened in his quote-unquote self-scouting.
Mm-hmm.
That, just change the formation some.
Yep. What did you think of the play of Mitchell Trubisky?
Early on, I hate to confess this, but there was a chat. There's 3 numbers, and they added me to it. And one of them is Aaron from I Have a Stream.
Mm-hmm.
And the other 2, I don't know who the fuck I'm talking to because I don't know their numbers. I have no clue who I'm talking to. For all I know, it's Phil and Shane. I don't know. But there's 3 of us, Aaron, 4 of us total, Aaron, 2 other guys I don't know, and myself. And I was saying to them at the time, I was like, man, I want this guy to be so good. This being early on. I said, I want this guy to be so good. I'm wearing his jersey. I want the pick to turn out to be salvageable. I'm cheerleading for the guy. Like when he missed that throw to Ted Ginn, which later they said was tipped, and I didn't notice it live. I was like, God, he's still missing the same throws. Like that 4th down throw to Ginn was just horrendous. And I was like, man, Mitch looks the same. He looks exactly the same, which, again, maybe you can still win with that if the defense does play at least some semblance to all the hype that they get. But for early on, I thought, oh, God, he's the same guy. And, but as the second half wore on, I was like, at least he's not quitting. He's handling the adversity. And this guy had the whole world on his shoulders. I mean, at halftime, I went to take a piss and get a water. And all I heard was Tony Gonzalez say, like, they need to put Foles in now.
That's right. I heard that.
So I think that was probably the consensus from everybody that was moderately talking about the Bears.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was the scapegoat, even if he had been playing well.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to take all that adversity, the only person, honestly, as much as I love Cutler and people are on him, this kind of goes back to Grossman, though, in terms of how just the whole world was on his fucking shoulders saying, this guy's got to play better or bench him. I don't know if Jay ever had that because nobody, except for maybe Josh McCown in 13, no one was saying, like, boy, you really need to put Caleb Haney in. You need to put Todd Collins in right now. So I don't think we've seen this in Chicago since Rex in the Super Bowl year /07. So to handle all that adversity, he deserves a lot of recognition because make no mistake about it, his entire career was in the balance.
Yep.
If they bench him right there, where does he go from there? Let's say they bench him, the Bears win, maybe they don't. It doesn't matter. If they start Foles in week 2, Where's he going? That would mean the Bears aren't going to sign him, and no one else is going to sign him to be a starter. He's going to be a backup at best.
Mm-hmm.
So his livelihood was on the line. Give the guy immense credit, in my opinion.
I am 100% with you. It is too bad that early judgments on players, and this really, it goes into an effect for all of life. You make a judgment on someone, and that judgment really, really sticks on like fucking Gorilla Glue to somebody. It takes an awful lot to get people to change their minds. And so the judgment made by Mitchell Trubisky that he's been a first-round bust, second pick overall, it has permeated throughout the NFL. 80-90% of the commentators have him on a super short leash. And then I saw it also with poor Charles Leno. Yes, poor Charles Leno. I know I'm going to get reamed for that. But we cannot make a judgment on Charles Leno in 2020 based on the poor season he had in 2019.
I agree. His 2018 was solid.
Exactly. I mean, he was an alternate Pro Bowler, played in the game. I think, this guy is a seventh-round draft pick. He's worked his way into a starting role. He had a bad season last year. I'm willing to clean the slate and judge him for his play in 2020, and he had a fairly decent game.
Well, think about how poorly Bobby Massey was the first year he was with Chicago.
Yes.
The very first year, I think it was like the first 4 or 5 games, he was getting speed rushes. I mean, every game was giving up 3 and 4 sacks. Mm-hmm. I didn't know he would make it to the second year of his deal, and he's in his second contract now.
That is correct. He was a notoriously poor starter to seasons. His first 2 or 3 games, Bobby Massey's, were always horrendous games, and it took him a while to get into it. Now, I am happy to report that so far this year, he's gotten off to a damn good start. And so perhaps that brand that he had as a poor starter is starting to evaporate, and both he and Leno had decent games for offensive tackles. And I have to get back to my interior of the offensive line. Those guys played better, and you need better play out of those guys because Mitchell Trubisky is not going to be sitting, or is not supposed to sit back there for a long, long time. Now, I want to play a clip of Matt Nagy talking about Mitchell Trubisky, and he was asked, does he have confidence in his quarterback? And this was an interesting response by the head coach.
So that's the inconsistency part that we're trying to really evaluate right now is, and that's what sometimes can make it hard, is there can be times throughout the first 3 quarters where it can be frustrating for all of us, everybody on the sideline. But then you get to that 4th quarter and you see how great it can be and how exciting it can be. So I think the biggest thing that we're trying to do right now, and we're discussing as an offense in general, is really being able to have that consistency 1 through 4 with more good than bad. Protect the football, get first downs, and then when you get those first downs, now turn them into touchdowns. So we don't get too high about the 4th quarter, and we don't get too low about the first 3. So we want to put a complete game together here this weekend.
Dan, it almost sounded like he wasn't really pleased with the overall performance, and I would have loved to ask the follow-up at any point in the game that you consider going to Nick Foles, just because everybody in the national media was asking for it. Don't you think that was an interesting response by Nagy?
Yeah, it feels like the entire training camp, or lack thereof, during this pandemic, and the few times that he has spoken to the Zoom reports or reporters, it feels like he hasn't really been in Mitch's corner the way, say, Lovey was when Rex is our quarterback. And maybe he can't be, because if he rallies around Mitch publicly and he fails, then maybe he gets the axe too, or gets the blame, and he's trying to distance himself from Trubisky. So if he fails, he won't get painted with that failure too and get another chance at drafting a quarterback. Conversely, if Mitch performs well, I think he'll want to get all the credit. And I'm not calling Nagy a piece of shit when I say that. That's anybody in that spot, I think. So what I'm trying to say is perhaps his disposition of almost being cavalier toward Mitch is just to cover his own ass.
Yeah.
If Mitch comes out and throws 4 picks or something next week.
Well, that's an interesting point of view. I didn't think of it that way. I just simply thought that I think he's just going to be a little bit more tougher on Mitch Trubisky than he has been in the past. We've accused.
Well, yeah, that's a good point too, because you remember during the Redskin game last year, he told him to I forget the exact quote, but it was like, "Hey, quit fucking around."
Oh, man like, the fuck up or something like that. Wasn't it?
Yeah, man up.
Yeah.
So I think you're right on that point too, though. I think he is using that 1980s parenting of tough love.
Mm-hmm. And which is something that we have asked him to do, because it really did seem like he was coddling this quarterback way too much. And as a coach, you have to know some guys you coddle a little, and some guys you got to kick him in the ass and so forth. Well, apparently, I think in the first season and a half or more, he thought that coddling Mitch Trubisky was the right way. And I always felt like, man, maybe it should be a little bit more kicking in the ass than coddling, because this guy seems to need to toughen up a little bit.
You know, the biggest transition from where Mitch was early on to where, not even Sunday, let's just say after 19, from my perspective, like when Mike Glennon was the starter and Mitch was number 3, I think, was it Brian Hoyer, I guess, was the backup. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So Mitch was number 3 on the depth chart. And he comes into that preseason game, which I believe was against Denver at Soldier Field, and he just lights it up, man. And he's just going. And again, he's playing against the backups. I get that. But it felt like he had a little bit of a swagger back then.
Yes.
And it was kind of taken from him. I'm not Dr. Phil here. I'm not trying to analyze his confidence, but it just felt like, I don't want to say he didn't believe in himself, but he damn sure didn't have a swagger anymore.
Right.
I guess all that negativity, just the realization is like, I'm not as good as when he was coming out. Hey, I'm the second pick of the draft. I can play this position. And he thought he could, and he looked like he could, but maybe the game last week, something that positive, because let's face it, he has not had that kind of positive energy in a while. And you can deflect it and attribute it to the Lions and all this other stuff. But from number 10's perspective, he's got something to build on now.
He really does.
And hopefully he can harness that, and that could be the catalyst for a second good game.
Oh, yes.
You start stacking those games, and then maybe it's wishful thinking, then maybe he gets a deal at the end of the season, which is ultimately, if you're a real Bears fan, and I hate to use that cliche because I don't want to say my opinion is the only one that's authentic or real, but I'm just saying, if you really are rooting for the Bears, you would want their second pick in the draft to turn out to be the right pick. It's never going to be right versus Mahomes, but again, you don't have to be Mahomes. You could still win with the guy you have. At least that's the hope.
Right. I'm with you 100%. I think, being a fan of a team means that they are, in essence, a part of your family, and you stick with them. Maybe sometimes you don't watch a game because you're angry at your team and your family member, but you stick with them. You're not going to say, okay, well, I'm going to be a Detroit Lion fan. Well, if you say that, then you're out of your mind.
Right.
But hey, I want to play another clip. This is Tariq Cohen, who's just, he's becoming much more comfortable in front of cameras. And, he was so super polite as a rookie, when answering questions, and he's starting to show more of his funny personality. But and unfortunately, I didn't pull any of those sound bites. What I pulled was the soundbite of him asking, "Did you notice something different in Mitch Trubisky in the fourth quarter?"
More so, I saw the change in the whole team. I feel like as an offense, we weren't all clicking on the same pages during the first 3 quarters, and then the fourth quarter, we knew like it's time. It's either now or never. So we all got that, that mentality that we got to do whatever it takes. To the outside world, it may seem like it's all on him in the first 3 quarters, but us being on the field with him, we know it's things that we could have done better.
I agree with him. I don't want to put all the blame on Jimmy Graham, but he was critical of himself.
Yes, he was.
I think if he makes those catches, especially that first one.
Yes.
The Bears are going to score on that drive if he just, I don't know what the hell, he mistimed his jump, I guess. So, I mean, you can look back at a game more often than not. There's a couple of plays that swing momentum, and those were big plays, and the Bears were able to overcome those. And in past years, they weren't. If something tragic happened like that, especially with Trubisky's fumble, because they were near midfield, maybe in Detroit territory. When he fumbled, not that they were necessarily going to go for it, they were going to punt regardless, but still, in past years, if it ends up being 4th and 41, we're not going to win. So to overcome those mistakes, again, leads me to enthusiasm.
Yep, I am so with you on that. Somebody in the weeks that used the cliche, football is a game. It was Mitch, actually. Football is a game of inches, and there were just... you could take that literally and figuratively, and there were just so many plays in that first half and in the first 3 quarters that if Graham makes that catch, if somebody lays a block down and so forth, then all of a sudden drives are sustained, and perhaps there would have been 21 points up on the.
I'll give you another one. In the first drive of the game, it was 3rd and 1, and they called a quarterback sneak, and I thought he got it.
Yeah, well. It was close. I would.
I don't even know if they did a measurement.
I don't think they did. No.
It looked like, again, I know that Fox line isn't, exact, but there was an argument to be made that I was like, man, that's a lot closer. I kept thinking to myself, they need to do a measurement on that. Like, he's close to this is at the very least 4th and inches, not 4th and 1. So, like you said, the game of inches. I thought, imagine if he gets the first down there in the quarterback sneak. And maybe that drive, maybe they score on the first drive. So, yeah, I'm adding to your theory or your thought of it's a game of inches or Mitch's theory. I agree because to me, that drive should have they should have taken another look at it.
Right.
What's the measurement?
Now, Mitch was asked, what did he improve on? What did he get a sense of that he improved on in this first week of the NFL? And he said the following.
I feel like my feet were a little more calm in the pocket. I feel like my eyes were up a lot more. I wasn't looking to run as often as I was last year, letting plays develop. And I feel like I was happy with a couple of throws that I threw a different type of ball than the ball I would have thrown last year, per se, just more dropping it in as opposed to trying to rifle it, seeing it earlier, letting it go. But there's still some throws on tape that I definitely need to improve from. So I'm going to focus on that and work on it in practice week and just try to keep getting better.
All incredibly good stuff, except for one thing I have a problem with. He needs to run the ball more.
Yeah, I agree. I'll address that. Just give me 1 second. I think it was Waddle that said, with regards to his footwork, or at least his ability to make a throw, the touchdown to Javon Wims. Again, you have like that Packer pick play that they did that the Green Bay for years never got caught on,
right?
Called on him. But this sort of a pick play, but sort of not a pick play. It is ticky-tacky if they call it. So I'm not saying it should have been called, but he still made the second read in the corner because from everything I could ascertain, the primary receiver there is Allen Robinson.
Yep.
And to make that throw in the back corner, it was perfect. And I think it was Waddle. I don't want to plagiarize the thought, whom said that he didn't think Trubisky could make that throw last year. So, again, if that's the case, then, again, you're looking at tangible progress.
Yes, I totally agree. And then there was that play on second down where he scrambled to the right, got near the sideline, and I'm thinking run and pick up 7, 8, 9, 10 yards. And instead, he threw it into the end zone, and it was a closely contested catch. I think it was Anthony Miller in the end zone. Do you recall this play that I'm talking about? And
not sure what half was it. The first half?
It's the second half, and so it was incomplete. It was a near touchdown pass, but the defender was.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, they said it was Mitch with the bad throw. There's the reason it wasn't complete.
Right, and you know, in my mind, that was an example of Mitch should have tucked it and ran. He needs to do that because he is so good at it, because it helps the offense. It keeps the defense honest, as opposed to them dropping back and defending receivers down the field. They've got to play a little closer to the offensive line, to the line of scrimmage. At least one player does to stop him from possibly running. And so there should be planned run plays, and in some cases, he should just run with it if there's a defender near the wide receiver. You look at the play of Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. He had, I think it was 7, 8, 9 rushes in that Cardinals win in week 1. And that's what I'd like to see out of Mitchell Trubisky, because he has that athleticism. He's not quite at that Kyler Murray level or Lamar Jackson, but he is very close to that, and it's a weapon that he needs to utilize.
Yeah, he had the one play, I think it was either on the drive that Graham caught the touchdown or it was the drive with the fumble. But he had the one scramble, and it right afterwards they tacked on the face mask to it, where he rushed for 10, 12 yards.
Yes.
And then his face mask got pulled too. Mm-hmm. So suddenly out of nowhere, the Bears had 30 yards of position, of field position, and that was a result of his scramble. So again, I agree. I think it seems like he really wants to impress Nagy to say, hey, I can be a pocket passer, and he probably should run more. But he did, at least in that one situation.
Yes.
It was big at the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. We're going to talk about the whole Allen Robinson situation, but we've touched on the running game. Impressive. But let's talk a little bit more about the running game, because do you like this running back by committee approach that Matt Nagy said today being Thursday in his press conference, that he prefers to have a multiple running back by committee approach to running the ball? That's what he said today. And I've heard him at other times say, I don't mind having a running back that's going to carry it 25 times. So he goes kind of back and forth on his opinion on things. But did you like this multi-pronged rushing attack that the Bears displayed against the Lions?
Yes, but I'll quantify my answer too and say that my preference would be, I've always wanted the big old school, Larry Zonka kind of back, or to make it more modern, a Jerome Bettis or LeGarrette Blount, somebody that could just be a bowling ball and run people over, which is my advocacy for Fournette earlier in the summer, that's the vision I had. Or Ajayi, for example, when he was with Philly, they won the Super Bowl with Miami before that, and he's just running people over. So I always have visions of God, I want that guy. But considering the personnel that we have, I thought it was the best method. And I don't want to besmirch David Montgomery, but again, I don't know what to think about Montgomery yet in terms of if he could be that guy. And you may not have Cohen beyond this year, so you might as well use what you have. You don't want him carrying the ball 20 times, but if you can use them, a splash run here or there, and then mix in the speed and the big size of Patterson. I like the approach. I don't know if he'll stick to it every week, but I do like the game plan, because I like the thunder and lightning approach too. With your personnel, I think that's with who we have. I like it.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing, that Cordero Patterson has this outstanding combination of size and speed.
Yes.
That I don't know. I can't off the top of my head think of another backfield player in the NFL who is quite like him. Now, he runs a little too upright to be a true traditional running back. He doesn't have that Larry
Eric Dickerson did it.
That is good. That is good. He did it very successfully. I think record-breaking successfully. My point is that I'm enamored with this approach. And Nagy said today on Thursday at his press conference that he could have, under ordinary circumstances, seen the amount of carries for Montgomery, for instance, increase by 4 or 5 carries if they would have played more 4-minute offense as opposed to 2-minute offense that they were forced to in the fourth quarter because of the deficit that they faced. So moving forward, if it's a closer game or they're nursing a lead, we may see even more carries out of the backfield, and we might get our wish seeing a running back like Montgomery out of the backfield getting closer to 20 carries as opposed to the 14, 15 he got Sunday.
Well, maybe again, I don't know. This is just me speculating, but perhaps the part of Montgomery only getting somewhat limited could also be a result of, he is coming back from a groin.
Yep.
So maybe even if he says, no, I'm a go, you still maybe leave the training wheels on just a tinge to protect the guy from himself, because you don't want him hurting his fucking groin again.
Yep. And I wouldn't mind seeing Ryan Nall get 4 or 5 carries out of the backfield, because I still believe that he has a unique combination of size and speed. He could be your Larry Zonka type player. I mean, I doubt that he'd ever be that good, but for short periods of time, Ryan Nall, I think, could come in there and do a really good job for this team. But I love Cordero Patterson. I love Tariq Cohen. He was running more effectively in between the tackles than he did last year. And I think running behind Jermaine Ifedi and that big fat ass, like I mentioned, is part of why he was more effective. And David Montgomery, I agree. You know, Matt Nagy has that reputation of nursing players with injuries. So perhaps he limited his carries for that reason. But I'll tell you this, he didn't look injured to me. He looked very, very effective.
You know, I was just thinking of correcting myself earlier when I was comparing other running backs that I wish we had. The guy that I should have said immediately is the Titans back.
Derrick Henry.
Oh my God, yes. That's the guy I want. Yeah. I mean, that style where this guy can just run over the team. But again, going back to what you just said, one of the things I thought last year that when they did run positively in spurts, which was again very sporadic, but was when they used Holtz at H-back or fullback. I don't even know, was he active Sunday? I didn't see him. I would like they could do some more of that in, you know, like an I formation sense, and give Montgomery a fullback and a blocker, or maybe even have Harris in the game at the same time. So you could do some power football.
Oh, yeah. And I think you'll see more of that as the season unravels here. All right. Now, I want to turn our attention to the play of the tight ends. You talked about Jimmy Graham and the fact that Jimmy was really rough on himself. And I listened to that 6-minute interview that he had. I think it was Monday, or maybe it was after the game. And he said, I am going to be tough on myself. I am going to go into that tight end room and hold myself accountable for the mistakes I made, and make sure that everybody that I lead by example in the tight end room. I was really, really impressed by those words, and I was impressed overall with his game. I thought he played a solid game and could have definitely had more yardage and more explosive plays, but it wasn't a bad start. And I was also impressed with his blocking, which is something he has been vilified for, but clearly he has improved as a blocker over the past few years.
I love the fact on the touchdown, that play for 5 or 6 years, Detroit used that against us repeatedly with Herman Moore.
Yes.
Who was 6'4", I think, off the top of my head.
I think you're right. Yes.
And they would isolate him on the side, basically run a fade, and it always worked. Always. They could have Scott Mitchell in there, Charlie Batchin. It didn't fucking matter who was playing. Don Mikowski. David Craig, all these guys they had sprinkled in there, and it always worked. And I always wanted to see it with Adam Shaheen. I thought, why not give him? Now we know, maybe he just wasn't capable. I don't know, but he was supposed to be this big, rugged, tough second-round pick just who needed to be noticed. He was from a small school, and you wanted him to show that he belonged, but they never really seemed to give him a chance at that. And then the first game rolls around, and I was calling for that, and whenever I'd be watching a game, like, why not split Shaheen out and throw it up?
Yes.
I always said that with Greg Olsen, too, and sometimes they did that when he was a rookie, but not much. So I was really happy to see first game, he's already struggled, and then they take advantage of his height and his size, and he scores.
Yep.
Take advantage of what his attributes are. He's a big motherfucker.
Yes, yes.
And when he was at the Saints, that's what you always heard during the broadcast. Well, Jimmy Graham used to be a basketball player. So he's got incredible athleticism.
Yep.
He's got dexterity, so let's use it.
Yes. And I think you will see more of that. And I just have one minor complaint on that touchdown pass. Mitch has to get that ball up a little higher because a better cornerback, better defensive back on that play might have knocked that ball down. But it was good to see the connection with Jimmy Graham. And my expectations are that Jimmy Graham, I'm adjusting my touchdown receptions for Jimmy from a modest 3 or 4 that I said a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's going to be closer to 7 or 8. I really believe he's going to be a touchdown machine for this team, and it looks to me like Trubisky is very, very comfortable throwing to him.
It seemed like the throw to Harris should have been a touchdown earlier in the game, too.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. That was one of those bad throws that Mitch had. He had him wide open, the tight end, and the ball just was overthrown on a corner route by the tight end. Now, I want to play John Jenkins, a friend of the Bar Room, talking about the offense and what he noticed from the defensive side when the offense started playing well.
I mean, it was big. It was really big to see the offense click like that. Like I said, it was a team win, and Matt and Coach is right, man. We gotta play better. And we gotta step up. But we all know when you're in this league, there's a big stepping stone from the first week to the second week. So here we are from the first week to the second week, and we're just working hard and trying to dot the I's and cross the T's.
I pulled that soundbite because you have such a great recall of NFL games and NFL seasons. Do you agree with what John is saying there, that, you know, that leap from week 1 to week 2 is something that is huge? And can you think of any time in Bears history where we saw that, where they came out and played flat or fairly well, and then in week 2, you know, they played demonstrably better?
You're saying if they were flat in week 1, but week 2 they were better, or you're saying conversely, like they were okay? Yeah. Well, first off, I was going to say week 1 is always wide open like that. They're always every year. There's a game like Arizona at San Francisco where you're like, what the fuck happened? Mm-hmm. How did San Francisco lose that at home? You know, like there's always a game like that in week 1. So to answer your question, let me think. Where they were better in week 2 than week 1.
Yeah, it's a tough question. I should have sent you a text saying, "Hey, give this some thought here," because I might pull this one out. As soon as I heard that,
I got one right off the top of my head right now. Well, not immediately, but I got one for you. The first game of the season, the first game ever that Jay had with the Bears was in Green Bay, Sunday Night Football. It's the last time the Bears wore white on white, which is a look I wish that we would go back to.
Yes,
but,
same here.
But and he threw the 3 picks, and then the next week they come out and beat the defending, reigning Super Bowl champion Pittsburgh Steelers at Soldier Field, 17-14, and Jay led the winning drive to set up Robbie's field goal.
Yes, Jay played a really super sweet game in that game against the Steelers. He had 2 or 3 good career games against the Steelers, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the game in Pittsburgh in 13 was. Ooh. He ran over that safety, Robert Golden, or was he a corner?
Yes, corner.
And he had the touchdown to Bennett at the end, some big throws to Brandon Marshall. That was a game of beauty. Yeah, beautiful game. I loved it.
All right. By the way, before we get totally off the tight end topic, I just wanted to say that Nagy was asked about Cole Kmet. And bottom line is, I wanted to share this with our listeners, is that Nagy made it known that they're going to bring him along a little more slowly than a lot of us anticipated. And it's not because of any fault of Cole Kmet. It's just the way they're going to bring him along. And so now, who knows? He's probably going to have 3 touchdown catches against the Giants. But historically, that is the way Matt Nagy brings along rookies. He brings them along slowly. I think, Jalen Johnson, the cornerback, not that I want to talk about defense just yet, but Jalen Johnson is really a starter now because of what happened with Artie Burns and Tolliver blowing a great opportunity. He had to be the first or second stringer. But so my expectations for Cole Kmet is that we're not going to see the real Cole Kmet until a number of games down the road. All right.
You know what I'd like to see? Mm-hmm. Let's just, I didn't mean to step on you there.
No, it's fine.
Let's say it's 1st and goal, 2nd and goal from, I don't know, inside the 10 5-yard line. Instead of getting in the shotgun, why not come out with one back, maybe David Montgomery, all 3 of your tight ends, and maybe A-Rob? And then you're talking about you got the 3 tight ends, so you got 2 guys definitely that could block if you're going to hand the ball off to Montgomery. But you put Mitch behind center. Mitch could technically do a bootleg with it, a Doug Flutie play, and keep it and run. But you could also throw it up to A-Rob. You could also then go play action, and maybe Kmet gets a score where they kind of gets lost in the shuffle because they're looking for Jimmy. They're looking for number 12. Maybe they're actually going to run it because he's under center. I think everybody on the field is an option that way. And even Harris is – I just hope that he'll do it. You know, like I just hate that fucking shotgun when it's first and goal from like the 3-yard line and you're in a shotgun. It drives me fucking mad. But if you use all 3 of those tight ends, your play action game is wide open. Well, and somebody, maybe Kmet could get a couple of those cheap Keith Jennings kind of touchdowns.
Well, I'll tell you this. I'm hoping that the Giants coaching staff is not listening to this podcast, despite the fact that I want everybody to listen to it because it's so entertaining and I really love working on this podcast with you. The reason I say I hope they're not listening is because I bet that we're going to see that formation this week. I bet we are going to see, I think it's called the 13 personnel package. I think we're going to see that. Now, I want to switch to, before we start talking about the defense, we of course have to talk about the Allen Robinson situation. Yesterday, he met the media to address the situation that happened the day before. On Tuesday, he scrubbed his social media accounts of all mention of the Chicago Bears, all photographs and so forth, and he was clearly unhappy with the way contract negotiations were going. So on Wednesday, on a day that is typically reserved for the head coach and the quarterback to talk to the media, he was trotted out and he answered questions, all sorts of questions like a pro. And he was asked this one question of, it must have taken a lot for you to take the time, because that was not something that you just press a button and it's gone. You had to do some work to scrub all your social media accounts of mentions of the Bears. This is what he said.
Once I get in between those lines and everything.
And that's the wrong one. But, Jesus, I thought I transferred it. I know.
I didn't hear this one. I only read the transcripts of his responses.
All right. Well, in this soundbite, he is talking about, is it going to be a distraction?
Once I get in between those lines and everything, my mind is not focused on anything else, and really not too much, outside of the lines, as certain situations may come up, but for the most part, again, everything is pretty much the same for me. I know there was a lot of commotion and stuff going on yesterday, but as I just was chilling, talking to Coach Furry about the game plan, watching some stuff on the Giants, so for me, I try to keep the main thing as much as possible. Obviously, being in the NFL, you have, the business of the NFL, so things do come up. But for me, for the most part, I'm able to keep the main thing always.
Now, the soundbite I thought I had queued up was him saying, yes, I was frustrated. Yes, I was emotional. And that's what led to him scrubbing all this stuff. So I really, really appreciated the fact that he came clean and said, didn't come up with some bullshit excuse. Oh, my assistant accidentally, sometimes players do that. And so and the fact that he met the media to address all this stuff, he and Matt Nagy had a good talk. And so seemingly they're in a good place now. But what do you think about this whole situation?
I got to be honest with you. I don't want to just give you the safe answer and say I'm on the fence here, but I kind of see both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, from a Bears fan perspective, I'm like, yeah, man, what are we doing? Why hasn't he signed a new deal already? I'm right there with you. I agree. And last week, we were talking. I said I didn't think he was as good as the gentleman in Arizona, Hopkins, but that doesn't mean that he's not a pure fucking number one and the best receiver on the Bears. But conversely, and I don't know if you were going to use, I don't want to step on it if you were, the Hub Arkush thing that really, really scared me, was when Hub said that because of the salary cap restrictions next year, he sees Bobby Massey and Charles Leno both getting released. Now, again, Hub hasn't announced a Bears game in a long time. Maybe he's not connected the way he used to be. But let's just say for a minute that he is. And that both of those guys are going to be salary cap casualties, just for a moment. then you have to see Ryan Pace's side of it. And again, I'm not the biggest Pace fan, but if you're thinking, look, I'm going to have to sign a quarterback, whether that's Mitch or somebody else, I'm going to have to sign a left tackle and a right tackle. Maybe, just maybe. And again, I don't think that these other guys are as good as Robinson. They're not. But maybe he's thinking, well, I've got Anthony Miller coming along. I've got this Mooney kid. And I still have Riley Ridley kind of just here. And I still have Javon Wims. I've got good young talent at wide receiver. Maybe that's the sacrifice we have to make because you're going to have to sign 2 tackles and a quarterback. And if they really are going to lower the salary cap, I know everybody says, well, you can make it happen and it's not a big deal. But it sounds like next year, because of the loss of revenue, it really is going to be a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand the organization. They've got to see the big picture that us as fans, we get lost in emotionally and say, fuck that, just sign him. And I want him to be re-signed. I hope that I'll wake up Sunday morning and the kickoff and they say, hey, Robinson's got a fresh 2 or 3 year extension. Because from his side of it, this guy's already been hurt his knee when he was on the last year of his deal. So I don't have a problem with what he was doing. Now, I liked what Mike North said and was just, one of his tweets. And it was just basically like, what the fuck, man? Look at all the Bears before you that have gone through this, and you're no better than Wilbur Marshall. Or, I get where he was coming from too. But I also, if you put yourself in A-Rob's shoes, he's like, dude, I've already gotten hurt on the last year of my deal before.
Right.
I don't want to be like the guy from Seattle. What was his name? He just got cut recently. The safety that was on the last year of his deal and then blew his fucking knee out and he gave the middle finger.
Earl Thomas.
Yeah, you don't want to be Earl Thomas because if Allen Robinson would tragically get hurt without a deal, that's seriously going to impact the contract he's going to get next year with whomever it's with.
Mm-hmm.
So I get Allen Robinson's side of it, saying, hey, man, I'm giving you all I got. I'm the best receiver you have, the best receiver you've had for the whole 3 years I've been here. Now reward me because it's not fair to put me in this spot in case I get hurt again. But again, because of that cap, I see Pace trying to be methodical and trying to work it all out. So maybe, I don't know this, I'm just saying maybe Pace did lowball him because he's like, look, Allen, we're trying to get all this shit together because of next year. And Allen's like, fuck that, man. I deserve it. So I see both sides, and where I know from a PR perspective, the Bears are going to be the ones, because it's low-hanging fruit to say the Bears are cheap. And they used to be really cheap.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think they've been like that since Mike McCaskey was left. I mean, I really don't. Like, whether it was the Cutler trade or Julius Peppers' deal, the Khalil Mack trade and deal. So they've been aggressive at certain times where in our lifetime we'd have never thought the Bears would do that. So my point is, I don't think that's the Bears being cheap as much as they just have to make this shit work.
I'm with you 110% if that is at all possible. I see it from both sides. I think that Allen Robinson saw Cooper Kupp getting his money, DeAndre Hopkins getting his money. There was a third wide receiver that was signed over the last few days. And he's thinking, well, those guys aren't concerned about salary cap. Then my agent tells me that those guys are going to be way over the cap, but yet they made those big signings. And so he is frustrated, and I don't blame him. Like you said.
Well, the Rams have their quarterback under contract, though.
Exactly. That is the huge point that people aren't seeing, is that there are other considerations. The Bears have to sign a quarterback next season, because if Nick Foles balls out, he has a contract out and he's gone. If Mitchell Trubisky balls out, he's going to demand a 25, 30, who knows what kind of $1 million contract. So there's going to be a lot of money invested in that. There's a lot of money already dedicated to people like Khalil Mack and so forth. So, and you don't know what the cap is. And Ryan Pace has leverage because he can place the franchise tag on Allen Robinson. So This is a little bit of cat and mouse. This is a little bit of negotiations. This is a player who's frustrated, but also felt like, hey, maybe, I'll make some noise on social media. Maybe that'll help apply some pressure because they've got the leverage at this point. Maybe if I make some noise and the fans and my teammates come to bat for me, maybe
all of his teammates seem to be on his side too.
They sure did, which is a great thing. It's a great thing. And I'm on his side. I want him to make every possible penny that he can, but at the same time, as a businessman, I also can respect what Ryan Pace and the Chicago Bears organization needs to do. I'm not advocating for them to be penny pinchers, but I am saying, hey, you have a kind of a fiduciary responsibility to the organization to try to keep the budget down as much as possible. So
if they have to sign a new left tackle and a new right tackle, which again, what Hub Arkush was saying, and I'm not trying to discredit Hub at all. I'm just saying if that was, maybe he was just speculating, but I sent you the clip. To me, he sounded like he said it with sincerity, like he knew this was probably going to happen, and that scares the hell out of me because, during the whole Cutler run, and you got Jamarcus Webb out there at left tackle. We can all hate on Charles Leno, and I have too, for rightfully so, for his 2019. But if you have Jamarcus Webb at left tackle, we've seen what that did to hinder the team. Like, Leno's good enough.
Yes.
He's good enough. Like, is he great? No. But we've seen Jamarcus Webb. We don't need another, just guy at left tackle just because we can't afford somebody else. At least Leno's a stopgap. But if they have to cut him, man, that's fucking huge. If you're having to rebuild the line and a quarterback in the same offseason, that terrifies me.
It sort of terrifies me, but let's I have not listened to the Hub Arkush interview. Where did you get this from? Where was he? Was on the Score?
Yeah, he was Dan Bernstein, and I forget what day it is, but he'll bring Hub on one of his hours. I think it's on Wednesdays.
Yeah.
And he'll talk to Hub a little bit like, you and I are talking, and then he turns it over to Hub and lets people call and specifically ask Hub Bears questions.
Right.
Hub, he does an hour with Dan Bernstein during the week. I think it's Wednesdays.
And I'm a big Hub Arkush fan. I'm a fan of the entire Arkush family because when I was a kid here in Chicago, I would find the newsstands in town that published or sold Pro Football Weekly, the Arkush article newspaper, and that was my lifeline to what was going on in the NFL. It was just an excellently produced newspaper with articles written by some of the best football writers across the country, and I knew what was happening with every one of the NFL teams. Pro Football Weekly. So Hub Arkush, if you're listening, huge fan, and let's listen to you now on the Dan Bernstein Show, courtesy of 670 The Score Sports Radio.
Allen Robinson is unhappy, 101% justifiably unhappy. Why the Bears allowed it to come to this is a bit of a mystery. I don't know if this is the Bears trying to overthink things and be too smart and be prepared for what's going to be a nightmare for every team in the league next year when they take it looks like it's $20 million. It's going to be about an 11% cap hit after 11 straight years of 10% plus cap increases. But you can't deal with that now. There will be answers. Beyond that, from a Bears perspective, I can't think of any possible explanation for this. He should have been done, and it would have been cheaper. The longer they waited, the more expensive it was going to get. There's going to be some pain. We know that. I mean, I can tell you right now, I can't imagine that Charles Leno and Bobby Massey are going to be back next year. They're the first two guys that come to mind with those $10 million cap hits. I'm sure they're looking at their cap situation next year, but it should be priority 6 or 7 in terms of getting this particular deal done.
I hate to ask this. What if they don't sign him? What if they don't extend him?
Then they better trade him, because they can't have this be the conversation in the locker room and around the team, every week for the next 8 weeks till you get to the trade deadline. It can't be healthy or good for anybody, and it would be a big loss for the organization. But it would be less than a loss of dragging this through the season. I think they've got, a week, 10 days to figure this out. And if they can't, then probably both sides are best served because, Robinson's not going to go with the trade unless there's a contract attached to it. I think it would be an awful outcome for the Bears, and I don't know that it would be a good outcome for him, but I think it's the only other option. The Bears can't just say, mind your own business, this is the way it's going to be, and go through the season this way and not expect that to have a tremendously negative impact on the team.
Now, what the left tackle, right tackle thing, I was screaming when I heard that, like, somebody please ask a follow-up?
Please.
Yeah, like, wow. So you're saying the offensive line is going to be completely in flux? You don't think either guy would accept a contract, rework it the way Kyle Long did, like essentially deferring the money later, taking a pay cut?
Exactly.
Like Leno is he married now?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, so he just got married, and I presume that he probably has a house in Illinois. So maybe maybe Leno's the kind of guy that says, hey, you all drafted me in the 7th round and stuck by me. Maybe he takes a contract, a decrease in his salary. You could defer that into a signing bonus, right? And not reduce the cap hit. Is that correct?
That is correct. And it's one of the things they can do with Allen Robinson, sign him to a contract, and it would actually reduce the cap hit for next year. So there are multiple ways to get this thing done. And Hub Arkush, your football knowledge is a million times much more than mine, but I think that was kind of an alarmist point of view there that you shared. I don't agree with this. I don't think you trade him. I don't think it necessarily means that both tackles are gone. Perhaps one, maybe, but I don't think it's a reworking of the roster because you've got to sign this guy. I think that there's Greg Gabriel said it on Gabriel and Schuster Talk Bears here on the Barroom Network. I think there's just, at this point, there's much to do about nothing. Let's let this play out. Let's be patient about it. It will get done. They're not going to let Allen Robinson go, and the offensive line is not going to go back to the days of Jamarcus Webb. It just is not going to happen. No, it's not.
I think just to defend Hub just for a moment, I think the full context of what he meant was, and again, I'm trying to get inside of Hub Arkush's head, but I think he was saying, this guy is too talented to let walk.
Sure.
And just not get something for him.
Absolutely.
So if you can't get the deal, if he doesn't like the offer and he's not going to take it, then maybe you should trade him because what are you going to get for him? A 2021 or 22 comp pick? So he's like, you could probably get a really significant pick for him, maybe a 3rd-round pick or something if you trade him in October, maybe even a 2nd is what I think he was trying to say for a team. He compared it to Emmanuel Sanders. San Francisco gave Denver a 2nd or 3rd-round pick for him. So I think that was the comparison. He's like, the Bears can ill afford to just let him go, like to play the year and say, okay, fellas, I'm gone.
Well, we're out trying to, here at the Barroom Network, get an interview with somebody who, and I'm not going to say the name because some other podcast will say, well, we'll try to get him too. I'm going to save the name, but we've got a lead on someone who could have some answers to us on this situation. So as the reporters like to say, watch this space. We'll have more on the A-Rob contract situation moving ahead.
Dan and Aldo will be right back.
All right, let's see what this next one is. Let's see here.
You guys are losing it. At least I could keep my cool here. You guys have absolutely lost it.
All right, this is from somebody in Antioch. Somebody by...
Remember the Blackhawk goalie? They had Auntie Rama. On days that he was terrible, we said that they got rid of Auntie, and so they brought in Uncle.
Okay. That's not as funny as this.
Just trying to get you guys to stop losing it and regain your equilibrium.
I don't think I'm going to be able to. All right, this is from somebody in Antioch named Peter Fitzenwell.
Oh my gosh.
just crossed over into the Grubstein and Schuster zone.
Only available on the Barroom Network.
Mac is not the man. He's one hell of a football player, I'll take you that. But what always makes great defensive ends is usually, more often than not, Mike, the play of the inside. The inside people. Why? So they can cave in the middle of that line. And why? So the quarterback can't step up. When the pressure comes from the outside, he can't step up and throw or escape to his weak or strong side underneath. And if you watch Akeem Hicks, I mean, that kid's a monster. He's terrific. And you watch and see how many times Mac benefited.
That was Ed Obradovich on the Mike North Advantage. And you can listen to Mike every week right here on the Bears Barroom Radio Network. On the latest, Gabriel and Schuster talk Bears.
And then there was this one play, a roughing the passer by Roy Robertson Harris, which I'm sorry. I mean, listen, when I was growing up, you could do almost anything in the NFL. And I know they've cut back on a lot of stuff, but come on, that was not a roughing the passer. I defy anybody to tell me, I mean, I know the rules, but it's just not. It's
Even
just
with the new rules, I question that particular call, but hey. But getting back to the defense, I was disappointed with the defense the whole day. They gave up too many yards on the ground. I tweeted out at one point, Eddie Goldman's being missed. His presence in the middle, the Detroit offensive line was winning the battle of the line of scrimmage at that point. But part of it was the linebacker play. Mm-hmm. Danny Trevathan, he was getting fooled by some things. He was not stepping up. He's taking steps back instead of steps forward on certain plays and giving Peterson some room to run. And then, he struggled in coverage. He plays fast because he's got great instincts, but he's not a 4.55 guy. He's a 4.7 guy at best. And that's when he came out of college. And to put him in a position where he's got to cover a crossing receiver one-on-one, he's going to lose that battle 80%, 90% of the time.
We now return to Dan and Aldo, Bear Their Soulz.
Now, let's turn our attention to the defense. Let's get Dan Aguire's overall point of view of how this defense played on Sunday in Week 1, and do you have reason to be concerned about Khalil Mack and about Robert Quinn? Because you've been texting me, and it sounds like you're a bit worried.
But watching the game, because again, Mac, I don't want to attack Mac here, but I'll come back to Mac. Let me put that pen right there, and I'll come back to him. Mm-hmm. Watching the game Sunday, like I had all these visions of like Jeremy Lincoln or Lemuel Stenson, like somebody that's always trailing the play, and it's like, holy shit, he's burned, and like he's 3 yards behind the receiver. That was Danny Trevathan all day. Mm-hmm. I mean, all fucking day. Even the back that dropped the pass, it was Trevathan that was beaten. All day it was Trevathan. But again, maybe it's the first game. All those things I said earlier, like, you didn't really have practice. You didn't really hit anybody. You certainly didn't have preseason games. I hope it's not, well, he's 30 and maybe you should have kept Nick Kwiatkowski. I don't know. But I was really concerned that Trevathan stood out to me as playing a really, really shitty game. Like in coverage, like he was always trailing the play, and it looked like he was struggling in the run game too. Like he was the guy that jumped out to me more than anybody as like, oh, fuck, what's going on with Trevathan? And that's not me stealing anybody else's opinion. That was honest to God what I was thinking on Sunday when I was watching it. With regards to Khalil Mack.
Well, hold on. Before you get to Khalil Mack, I want to say this about Trevathan. I want to say two things, actually. Sure. Greg Gabriel said the very same thing on Monday. He when we started talking about defense, he was alarmed at Danny Trevathan's play. And what was also, the second thing I want to say is Chuck Pagano was asked about Danny Trevathan's play.
Yeah, he kind of protected him, though.
He sure did. This was an interesting response.
I don't think, as a unit, again, at times we all played really good, and at times, we didn't do our job well. At times I didn't do my job well. So, again, it's game one, it's week one. No overreaction, by anything, and so. We'll be much better. I expect a huge leap from week 1 to week 2.
Now, Matt Nagy's response to that question earlier in the week was a little bit more forthright. He said something to the effect of, Danny will tell you he could play better. So, but I thought it was interesting that Pagano basically avoided even mentioning Danny Trevathan's name in that response.
Could you imagine Bruce Arians doing that? He's criticized Brady this week.
I love it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I just don't know. That is really, really, I guess we'll find out on Sunday, or at least the next couple weeks, if maybe Trevathan's the guy they cut at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's a very, very strong possibility. And when they had to make that decision between Nick Kwiatkowski and Danny Trevathan, I could have gone either way. I love the leadership that Trevathan offers. I love his kind of Pernell McPhee, junkyard dog attitude that he brings to this team. Nick doesn't.
I hated Pernell McPhee.
Really?
Pernell McPhee was a lot of fucking bark and no substance. I mean, he had like 3 good games in 2015, and then he was just running his mouth at Cutler. And
well, yeah,
I was glad he was gone.
That is true. That from a teammate standpoint, he was not enamored with Jay Cutler. But the one thing about Pernell McPhee that I'll say is that he provided a huge boost in certain games. And the other thing I'll say is that John Fox totally screwed him up, because McPhee arrived to the Chicago Bears with a knee injury, and he should have been a specialist pass rusher as opposed to having him in the game for almost 80% of the defensive snaps. That was just ruining the guy's career and ruining his time here with the Chicago Bears. But that's another story. I want to get your point of view on Khalil Mack.
Well, it makes you think, because of his huge cap hit moving forward, would he be willing to renegotiate to try to lower his cap number if that's an issue? Because I don't think that I don't have an alarmist perspective on saying, oh, it's time to move on or something. That's crazy. That's insane. As far as we know, Mack is dealing with a knee.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't want to Julius Peppers this, in the sense that I don't want to move the goalpost and make the new standard to say, well, he had 6 pressures though. And that's good. I mean, because he's paid handsomely well to make sacks.
Right.
So if we're just suddenly, again, coddling him, to use what they say about Mitch, the way I thought that the Bears fans always did with Peppers and made excuses, like, I feel like that's the same thing we were doing with Mack. If we say, well, he got 6 pressures though. I mean, he had more pressures than anybody in week 1. I mean, to me, Mack hasn't had a game where he was the guy that took over the game since and I'm pretty sure you were at it when we clinched the division against the Packers in 2018.
I was there, yes. And you're right. That was probably the last, I would say, great game that he's had as a Bear. Yeah.
He had the backward sack in that game.
Mm-hmm.
He got Rodgers from literally behind. It was just amazing. I don't think he's had a game where he was dominant since December of 2018. And that is disconcerting, because especially where and I'm going to put myself in this category too, we all want him to do well. So I was on him last year in the minority, and I don't want to be on him now after 1 week. It is concerning, not to the level of Danny Trevathan, because I'll ask you a question then. Let's assume that Mack, his 2020 is akin to his 2019 and not his 2018. Then where do the Bears go from here in 21? Do you ask him to take a pay cut? Do you try to move him? Because maybe he's offended if you ask him. But then again, you got his brother in the practice squad. Maybe he feels like, hey, the organization's doing all they can by me, even having my brother here. So maybe he works with you. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, first of all, he's already done it once. He's already made adjustments to his contract that alleviated some cap concerns last season. So he will definitely do it again if he is asked to. That's one. Number 2, my concern is his body starting to break down? This guy plays in a very physical fashion, and so he was wrecked by injuries last season, and now for the first 2 games of the season, he has not had a full week of practice leading up to that because of a knee concern, and he's been limited in practice. So that is concerning. You want your players, whether they're the stars or the third stringers, you want them available for practice and available for every snap of practice. So that is a concern. Number 3 is, I forgot what number 3 was. Hold on, it'll come to me. Number 3 is this guy, Khalil Mack, is definitely a guy that you need in order to have a successful defense. But it doesn't have to be from the edge position. Why isn't Chuck Pagano using him more creatively, particularly now since, like I said earlier in the show, quarterbacks are getting rid of the ball faster? Why not line him up at defensive tackle a couple of times? He should be playing up and down that line. Left side, right side, middle. They should be looking, where's he lined up now? Where's he lined up now? So a part of the blame for Khalil Mack's lack of production, I am putting on Chuck Pagano.
Do you think that Mack would be, if he is where we're speculating he could be, in terms of, okay, his body's starting to, for lack of a better phrase, break down. Mm-hmm. And let's just say he's going to be a good player, but not a great player. If that's where he's at, do you think he'd be better suited in a 4-3, maybe playing a defensive end like a Richard Dent versus being a linebacker?
One of the things that I learned from Draft Dr. Phil when we did the 100 Proof show together is that there are basically in a 4-3 for a high percentage of plays. It's a 3-4 defense, but because they're in a pass rush mode, they're basically, if you look at Sunday's game against the Lions, they were playing with 4 down linemen on a number of snaps.
Sure.
For the next show, I'll have that stat for us so that we can dive into that, because it's a great question. But I think the answer is, I don't think that's a huge issue. I think we want him just playing up and down the line, being unpredictable. I think part of the issue is that Pagano hasn't been as creative as Vic Fangio.
Yeah, I'll compare him to Peppers, and using the exact same thing what you just said, it seemed like maybe Peppers was done with the Bears. Like, at least his better years were behind him, and he had always been in a 4-3 in Carolina or Chicago, and then there he goes to Green Bay. Oh, how's he going to be a linebacker now? And he's 35 or whatever. And he did really well there. Like, his tenure in Green Bay was much better, I think, than it was in Chicago.
I agree.
And part of that, I guess, was they used him more as a specialist.
Yes, that is absolutely true.
Maybe that's what you were saying, that maybe Pagano just needs to use him as a pass. Go get the fucking quarterback. And again, scheme him open for blitzes and things like that. Maybe like the way the Steelers used to run in the mid-90s, when they were Blitzburg, like scheming blitzes for him.
Yeah.
And make him more specialized. And perhaps that's the way they will go if Quinn can get on the field.
Oh, please. Well, and frankly, I thought that it was going to be Quinn who's going to be the specialist, because he comes from a strictly 4-3 background. And so there was going to be some kind of acclimation process that he really has not gone through because of the lack of a preseason camp and his unavailability during preseason and so forth. So once he's back on the field, and hopefully it'll be Sunday, although my gut says it won't be until week 3, because the Bears traditionally have a very conservative approach to bringing along injured players. But as soon as he gets back on the field, I hope that this acclimation process to this 3-4 hybrid 4-3 defense that Pagano runs, it's not going to take him a while, and that they can he immediately starts to pay dividends. I also think, as we're talking about the defensive line, that Eddie Goldman's absence is much bigger than perhaps a lot of us thought, particularly against the run. But even on passing downs, Goldman was really good at occupying blockers. two blockers, two pass rushing blockers if necessary, so that the outside edge rushers and even Akeem Hicks could get to the quarterback much more easily. Yes, Eddie Goldman is first and foremost a run stopper, but when he was on the field for passing downs, he occupied bodies, and his absence is a loss for the Bears.
How can you take anything away from Goldman? I agree with you wholeheartedly, and obviously he can't be activated. He can't change his mind this season. I don't know why. I mean, right now we've got, what was it, $17 million in cap space. Of course, some of that's fool's gold because it would be Goldman's salary, but it is available right now. Can you just call Harrison up, Snacks Harrison, be like, look, bro, 1 year, $2.5 million, whatever. Just you come and just take this guy's spot. Help stop the run the rest of the year, and then you can go off into the sunset if you want to retire. Just help us this year.
I think that what happens is that these coaches and a front office people say, okay, we have made an investment in the players that we have here. Let's try to get this to work. We still have confidence in a John Jenkins. We still have confidence that Roy Robertson Harris and Bilal Nichols can fill the void left by Eddie Goldman. So I don't think that they're ready to pull the trigger on that, particularly for those reasons that we talked about regarding the salary cap and just trying to keep money available. So that I think is what is going on here. Now, we have to talk about the run game. You mentioned Danny Trevathan. We talked about Danny Trevathan's lack of effectiveness against the run. Now, Chuck Pagano issued this word of warning. We have to get better because this is a copycat league, and you better believe that the Giants have been looking at what Adrian Peterson did to the Chicago Bears, and they're going to try to replicate it with Saquon Barkley.
What we got, it's a copycat league. We're going to see the same thing. You know, they run, you know, we got a great running back coming to town, and you know, after last week, you know they're going to try to run the ball right at us, you know, whether it's between the tackles, get them on the edge, throwing the ball in the pass game, screens, this, that, and the other. So we've got our hands full.
Did you watch the Pittsburgh game with the Giants Monday?
I did not, but I saw the box score, and when I saw Barkley's numbers, I went, what the hell happened?
I know the Pittsburgh bottled him up, so to speak, statistically, but there were a couple of runs where he was in full stride, like he was Willie Gault going out for the '84 Olympic team or something, like where he was running in full stream and full speed and hurdling people all in one motion and then continuing his run when he hit the ground. I mean, he did that twice. The second time wasn't as effective as the first time, but he was leaping over cats and like, man, he is really, really athletic. He's incredible. And he seems to be back when the Bears played him last year. He was coming back from an injury. So, you got to worry about him. Plus, he's like 12 years younger than AP.
Yes, I am very, very worried about this. On the Mike North Advantage show this morning, I went out of my way to share some stats of the two games that he's played against the Bears. They're not tremendous stats, but my point is that I expect, just like Pagano said a few hours after the Mike North Advantage show, is that they're going to try to copy what Adrian Peterson did week one. And so Barkley is a better back than Adrian Peterson. When Pagano was asked by Patrick Finley, a Chicago sports writer here in town, he was asked, can you compare Barkley to another player? And Pagano said, well, I'm not good at comparing players. But then he started, rattling off his characteristics and his strength as a runner and his speed and so forth. And then all of a sudden the name Earl Campbell was blurted out by Pagano. And I was like, wow, I never thought that Barkley was an Earl Campbell type player. But yeah, right? You wouldn't think that. But when you add up the characteristics, there are similarities. They're not in terms of body build and other things, but in terms of the overall, if you were to list on paper the characteristics, he does have a lot of Earl Campbell in him.
I don't have Earl's Pro Football Reference in front of me, but I think the late 70s and the Love You Blue, the 2 years they were in the AFC Championship game, I think he was running the ball like 330 times a season.
Oh, yes.
And consequently, by the early 80s, he had nothing left.
Nothing.
When he was at the Saints, he was really struggling when Bum Phillips went to the Saints. And, they had Stabler there, too. It's just, I don't know, man. I don't see, again, Chuck knows more about football than I will ever know. But to me, like, Barkley's more, like, Campbell he did not have the athleticism or finesse that Barkley has. To me, Barkley is a better athlete. Earl was more powerful.
Yes, I agree with that. But I think what he meant is, that Barkley has those power characteristics like Earl Campbell, and Earl Campbell had those athletic traits like Saquon Barkley, but not quite, each player not quite at the same level. And like Pagano said, he's not good at making these player comparisons, but Earl Campbell was the name that he blurted out after 30 seconds of talking about it. All right, I want to turn our attention to that defensive line. One of the things that I thought was impressive about the defense against the Detroit Lions was that they clearly were not playing well. And then all of a sudden, the Fox Sports cameras see Khalil Mack on the sideline, and I think there was the sideline reported that Khalil got the team together and kind of fired them up. This isn't our kind of football and so forth. And so Akeem Hicks was asked about that on Sunday after the game, and this was his response.
During the course of a game, you have your ups and downs, right? And we hadn't been playing like ourselves up until that point. And we had a talk on the sideline, and we were talking to ourselves and as a group, and we were saying, hey, we got to play our type of football. And everybody came out there with that mindset. So even before the sack, the energy was up, and we were trying to play defense the way that we know how to play it. And we got it rolling.
That my glass half full Aldo says that I'm heartened by that. I'm encouraged by that these guys know they're not playing well because there's no fans in the stands. There's nothing riling them up because they traditionally this team does come out a little flat, to start games and so forth. And, the Lions get out on a 3-and-out first, and they start to kind of rest on that laurel and stuff. And then before you know it, these guys are taking advantage of us and taking advantage of the mistakes of our offense. So we gotta get our shit together. And they did, and they did it in a very impressive fashion. So I'm encouraged by the fact that these guys got it together.
Couple of things for you. First off, Akeem missed practice today.
Yeah.
I hope
illness.
I hope it's not COVID. The only results that have come back so far have been from the Chiefs Houston game. Everyone was clean. But he tweeted something about like he couldn't breathe, but I think he had nasal congestion or something. Hopefully he's going to be okay. With regards to everything you were saying about the game itself, one thing that really concerned me, and I didn't realize this because I'm giving full credit to Olin Kreutz. I don't know the Detroit Lions very well other than the obvious, star players. I don't know their offensive line because I'm not a Detroit Lions fan. Kreutz was pointing out that 3 of the guys on the offensive line were backups, and that like Akeem Hicks was getting manhandled one-on-one by a backup. So that I was like, wow, I didn't know that, But at the end of the game, there was Akeem with the sack, and again, it's week 1. They haven't hit anybody, haven't built up any fluidity, or as Fox said, or was it Nagy? One of them's always saying you got to have like scar tissue or calluses or whatever the fuck. I can't remember which one it's always said. But anyway.
Yeah, I think it was Fox that was Fox that said that. Go ahead, though.
Yeah, so it's week 1, and like again, they're still kind of working themselves into shape. So maybe that's not that big of a deal. And I still think Akeem has a lot to give, is what I'm saying. I wasn't so, and he still got the sack when the game was on the line at the end. If that was true, and I have no reason to discredit Olin Kreutz, I didn't know if 3 backups were beating that line. Again, that's why I'm saying, like, hey, what's Snacks Harrison's number again?
I think Olin said it was 3 backups. I don't think that's necessarily.
Yeah, he brought it up. Like maybe one of them got hurt or something. Yeah, I should have seized the audio on it.
The right tackle of the team, who's got this Polynesian name that I could never even attempt to pronounce, he was hurt for the game, and so they had a backup at right tackle. But the rest of the offensive line, to the best of my knowledge, was intact throughout most of the game. So I'm not quite sure. So I'm not going to comment and say Olin was wrong there. But I am not dismayed by the performance of Akeem Hicks. This guy is coming off of an injury last season. It's going to take him a game or two. One of the interesting things about professional football, there's only 16 games to a season, but it can still take a team or a player 3, 4, 5 games to get to the type of level of play that they or he should be at. And so I don't think we're going to see Akeem Hicks and some of the other players play at the Pro Bowl level that they played at recently, but they will eventually get there. I have a lot of confidence in Akeem Hicks still. I don't think that this is going to be an issue moving forward.
No, I agree. You just hope that he's healthy and damn sure doesn't have like the virus or something, which again, I don't think he would have been joking about, his nose or whatever if it was that serious. And to steal a segment from a previous show, I'm not going to call this a dumb tweet, but a funny tweet. In relation to Jeff Dickerson's report about Akeem not practicing today, he said, I'll read the whole tweet and then response.
Okay.
Bears defensive lineman Akeem Hicks did not practice today because of an illness. Khalil Mack, knee, and Robert Quinn, ankle, remain limited. All right. Hammer 319 at... let me get it right. Hanner_Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. He says, is Robert Quinn Trey Burton Part 2?
Oh, no.
Oh, wow. I mean, if that's the case, we are really, really fucked. God.
I am hopeful that Robert Quinn is going to be the player that played with the Dallas Cowboys. But
he was good with the Rams, too.
He was with what team last year? He was
last year was at Dallas.
Right.
He's been on like 4 different teams in 4 years.
Yeah, but after the Rams, he was with who?
Jacksonville, maybe?
Yeah, because he started to kind of disappear then, and I started to think, well, Robert Quinn is no longer Robert Quinn. And so when he became a free agent, I was not excited about the prospects of him potentially coming to the Bears. But then I learned, well, wait a minute, he did have a good season with the Dallas Cowboys, and so maybe there's a resurgence in his career. But bottom line, what I'm trying to say is that I'm not totally convinced Robert Quinn is that guy from the Rams where I was like, whoa, that guy is a stud. I'm hopeful that he can at least get to the caliber of play that we have with the Dallas Cowboys, that we saw with the Dallas Cowboys that I learned about, that he played well. And I'm hopeful that he's going to help Khalil Mack play to his potential and also assist Akeem Hicks in getting the 7-8 sacks that Akeem got in 2018. But I am a little worried. I'm a little bit worried that Robert Quinn is going to be more of the guy who was with Jacksonville or whatever team it was that he played with after the Rams. So I'm concerned a little bit.
I'm concerned. I've been concerned the whole preseason when he wasn't practicing at all, and I felt like they were being deceitful, saying, oh, well, he's just revving up, and he'll be fine, and he's got a personal thing. Like, just fucking – ever since Kevin White, and that was a different administration.
Yes, it was.
It's just like there's just this although pace is the constant, the common denominator, it seems like there's this web of lies. Like, like, oh, remember how that whole summer when – oh, White's going to be fine for week 1, and just fucking say the guy's hurt. I'd almost rather them come out and say the way Nagy did last week and said, I'm just not going to tell you. I'm not going to talk about injuries, as opposed to lying to us and placating us. So I don't know what to think about Quinn, although until he gets on the field, I'm going to be concerned, and I hope that he does play. I got a question for you. I didn't, again, I haven't watched an all 22, and I didn't focus because I watched it as a fan real time and was just watching the game. You know, to really break things down or extrapolate, you really kind of have to watch it again, and without the emotion of what's happening, you know, without being sucked in, because you already know what's happened. So my question is, the kid that was wearing Singletary's number, the other linebacker that was playing in place of Quinn, well, how did he do? Does anybody know? Does anybody talk about that guy's performance? I don't even know his name.
Who number 50? Okay, we got to do some research here because
yeah, he was the guy that started in Quinn's place, and as far as I know, he's the first guy to wear 50 after Singletary, with the exception of that fucking McClellan. McClellan was like 90 something, and then they moved him to linebacker. Then he went to 50.
Oh, you're talking about Barkevius
McClellan.
Yeah, but you're talking about Barkevius Mingo. Yeah,
yeah.
He did not shine exactly on Sunday, and I have not watched the All-22. It was released today on Thursday when we're recording this show, and I've just been too busy to take a look at it. But from the reports that I read is that it was a disappointing debut. Now, when Mingo was signed by the Bears, it was primarily because he's going to provide a dozen to 20 good solid snaps a game and provide excellent special teams work. That's what he has been known as a football player for the last couple of seasons. He is not a starter at that position, and the fact that he was forced to start there is a scary sign for the Chicago Bears. So Barkevius,
is he a huge downgrade from, say, Leonard Floyd?
Yes,
I thought so too, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and Leonard Floyd, rightfully so, is making a hell of a lot more money than Mingo. You know, you can say whatever you want about Leonard Floyd not being an elite pass rusher, and he wasn't. That is absolutely sure.
He was good in coverage and good against the run.
He did a lot of good things, including playing extremely well against our arch nemesis, the Green Bay Packers. Leonard Floyd was never as bad as some people made him out to be, but he was not a top 10 draft pick. He wasn't of that caliber, but he's the kind of guy I think that is going to have a long career in the NFL. He has a lot of versatility. He can play the inside linebacker. He can play the outside linebacker. He can play kind of a hybrid safety position. He's that athletic, but he's never going to be a 10, 12 sack guy in the NFL because he just doesn't have that power and so he's got to have the right matchup in order to generate effective pass rushes. But we've got a problem at that edge position, and the only way it's going to be solved is if Robert Quinn comes to this team healthy and is able to play at that level that he did last season with the Cowboys.
You know, going back to what you were saying about Floyd, briefly, it made me think in my head about, again, the jury's still out on Mitch and technically Tariq Cohen because they could be re-signed. Although I'm afraid Cohen's going to be caught in the numbers of like, well, we need all these other people re-signed too, and he's going to get money somewhere else. And I just hope it's not Green Bay or Minnesota or Detroit. I'd like to see him back, you know, I mean, but my point is, all of these like experimental picks like that Pace has made, most of them haven't panned out, whether that's Leonard Floyd or maybe not Cohen, but Shaheen, like you're drafting on potential, Trubisky versus pure numbers in college. And again, I hope Mitch works out. I hope he gets re-signed. I hope he earns being re-signed, not he's just re-signed just because.
Right.
But all of these like draft picks that he has made based on what could be seems to have been disappointment.
I agree with that. And I think that one of the things that is going to be on the Ryan Pace tombstone is that very thing. You know, his failure to find those special players that make a lasting impact in the draft. And so I don't think Tariq Cohen is going to be back, and I wouldn't advise them to spend any kind of big bucks to get him back because Tariq Cohen to me is the kind of guy that can be replaced by a third, fourth, fifth round draft pick. just like Tariq Cohen was. What was he, a 4th-round pick?
Yeah, great pick. I mean, considering he was a 4th-round pick.
Yes, but, you can find quality running backs in the draft at that mid-round range who have the qualities of a Tariq Cohen. You know what? And Tariq Cohen would be a sensational player if he had a 4th gear. He doesn't have... a lot of people think that Tariq Cohen is fast. Tariq Cohen is not fast. He's quick. He can cut on a dime, but he can't outrun some of the faster safeties and defensive backs in football. He just can't. I've seen it. I love Tariq Cohen. I hope that he plays 10 years with the Chicago Bears. I doubt that it's going to happen because of the money game, and I do think that he is replaceable. Having said that, I hope he has a great year and takes the opening kickoff in the Super Bowl for a touchdown, and we end up winning the game.
Well, Patterson will be returning the kick, though.
That is right. Well, the opening punt, the first punt, or whatever.
Cohen kind of reminds me, and again, I guess you would say his body of work is perhaps better, but maybe not. Mm-hmm. But he sort of reminds me of Eric Metcalf. And by the time the Browns lost Metcalf and he went to the Falcons, they moved him to the slot. They made him a wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Cohen could have a second life. I don't know. He's only 5'7", but if he can't make it as a full-time back, that might be something you could do to exploit his quickness. You get mismatches is what I'm trying to say if you have him in a slot. But it felt like we did that a lot in 2017 and some in 18. They've kind of gotten away from that.
I agree with that. I agree. It's to me, he has been a very perplexing player on this team. That rookie season was a wow season. I remember sports reporters comparing him to Gale Sayers and Devin Hester, and I thought it was a little overblown at the time, but he's not that. He's definitely nowhere near the level of those players, but he's got the capability of making big plays, and you need that, just like with the Kansas City Chiefs. We saw them on opening week, the opening day of the season, a week ago tonight. Those guys have some playmakers on that squad. Oh my goodness. And unfortunately, Ryan Pace just hasn't been able to make that big jackpot acquisition in the draft. Cohen, close, but not quite.
If you're curious, speaking of Thursday night football, it's in the 4th quarter now with 8 minutes to go, and the Cleveland Browns lead the Cincinnati Bengals 28-16.
What do you think about Joe Burrow?
I only watched a few minutes of that game because of I was still like too high from the Bear win. I wasn't really paying attention.
Literally?
To the late. No, I don't do any drugs. But I was just euphoric because the Bears hadn't won opening day since the Bengal game in 2013.
Oh wow, so, that's right.
Yeah, so I just really wasn't paying attention to any of the 3 late games, not even the Brady game, but I did see it on a little bit, but every time I did, it was when the Chargers had the ball, and I was like, why is Tyrod Taylor the starter? That's what I kept saying. Mm-hmm. But I can't believe the Bengals kicker missed that field goal. That looks like something that would happen to the Bears. Did you see that?
No, I missed that, no.
Oh, man, well, he did too. It was a 3-point deficit, I believe, and it was like 28 yards, and it was like the one that Connor Barth missed when Tom Brenneman said, "Holy Moses." It was that bad a miss, and that's how the Chargers won.
Hey, I wanted to ask you, yesterday was when I was on the Buffon 55 show, John asked about the team's defensive backfield and said, could that be the best position area of the Chicago Bears, better than the linebackers, better than the defensive line? And I said to myself, well, they got 2, really, really good players, Pro Bowl, all pro caliber guys, and Eddie Jackson and Kyle Fuller. There's no doubt about it. I mean,
well, let's hope Eddie goes back to 2018 Eddie.
Well, he did look like 2018 Eddie in that game one. Now, there's extenuating circumstances. Kenny Galladay wasn't there and blah, blah, blah. But he did, to me, he showed that he could be that 2018 Eddie Jackson. But the other intriguing thing about this Bears defense is Jalen Johnson. He made a fairly impressive debut. Yes, he made some mistakes. To be expected. It's his debut in the NFL. He's being picked on by a veteran quarterback. And so he made a couple of plays that you wish he would have had back. But overall, I thought he played well. I want to get your thoughts on Jalen Johnson after we hear about Chuck Pagano talking about the second-round draft pick, picked 50th overall by the Bears.
He wasn't overwhelmed, and he knew he was going to get targeted, and he responded. He made some plays. Really made some great plays in some critical situations. He got his hand in there with Eddie on the forced interception, gave a ball back to our offense in great field position, and knocked down the last one. So great learning experience for him.
I'm impressed by him. What do you think?
Yeah, and he got absolutely run over earlier in the game, and yes, I saw like Matt Forte and a couple people were dogging him, saying like, "How can you have Peanuts number on and give it back?" And I mean, I know it wasn't good fun, but yeah, to get run over like that, and again to come back at the end of the game, his deflection, or it appeared to be, from my perspective, part of what led to Kyle Fuller's pick.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was impressed with him. Again, that's embarrassing for a guy just to get trucked like the way he did.
Yes.
And he overcame that. And again, in your first game, that's difficult. I thought, yeah, he's got promise. He doesn't look like, Tom Carter or somebody where I'm just like, oh, why do we have this guy? Or even Walt Harris, even though he was around a long time, I still was like, or Jeremy Lincoln. You're just like, I don't have any faith in this guy at all. But I think, he's got some potential, and obviously Fuller is solidified himself as our best corner. He's kind of our Donnell Wolford now.
That's right. That's a good comparison.
Wolford was kind of a bust early on, and then, at least from Ditka's perspective,
yes,
he blamed Wolford for 89, all those losses. We won't win another game with a corner out there like him, or whatever the fuck he said. I forgot exactly, and they didn't. They didn't win another game. But yeah, the safety Jackson, should be Eddie Jackson, and I don't know. Like, I remember Shane was telling me that the Gibson guy was really good. I haven't seen enough of him to know. And I know that I saw Bush on the field frequently, though. It seemed like he played a lot.
Because they started to bench Trevathan because of his poor play, and so they went with an extra defensive back. Yeah, so
he was getting scorched. He was.
Yeah. And so Trevathan hit the bench, and they brought Bush in, and so that it's going to be very, very interesting to see if Trevathan snaps increase against the Giants or stay the same or even decrease. That's going to be very, very interesting. But one thought about Jalen Johnson is when you take into account that rookie players in the NFL, what is it that they say? They say, yeah, it's taken me a little while to get used to the speed, and these guys are a lot, not only faster, but they're a lot stronger. And so when he gets bowled over, that's to be expected. And so that's right. It's a great thing that now he has had that experience, and he knows, okay, I'm going to have to hit the weights a little more. I'm going to have to use proper technique. I'm going to have to do all the things necessary in order to play at this NFL level. And what is also encouraging is, as you just said, that he came through at the end and he didn't let that affect his play during critical times. And so he's a tough kid mentally. I'm encouraged by his play, and I'd love to see this Chicago Bears defensive backfield have some continuity for at least 2 or 3 years. Could we not please see Fuller, Jalen Johnson, Gibson, and Eddie Jackson as our 4 defensive backs, our 4 main defensive backs for the next 2-3 years? I really, really, really would love to see some continuity at that area. I think that's an underlooked and underappreciated area by the Chicago Bears administration. Ryan Pace plays a lot of assets, resources into pass rushers, which is fine, but you got to also think about those guys in the back end because they can make up for some of the mistakes or the lack of production in terms of pass rush and hurries and so forth by your defensive linemen.
Eddie Jackson is our best playmaking safety since Mike Brown, without question.
Yes.
And Mike Brown's last year with the Bears was 2008. That's how long they went with just patchwork, like let's get a retread tire out here as opposed to drafting the guy like Jackson. And so hopefully he just plays his entire career with the Bears.
Right.
And hopefully he stays healthy.
And Eddie,
you want him to be the marquee safety, the guy that's our home run hitter for years to come.
Right. And Eddie Jackson was on his way to being a number 1 draft pick or first round draft pick in the NFL draft, but he broke his leg at Alabama. And so the Bears lucked out and were able to get him. What round did they get him at? 4th round, was it?
Yeah, I was going to say 3rd or 4th. I thought it was 4th, though.
Okay. So that's one of those great picks by Ryan Pace, and we'd love to see more of that. All right.
Hey, did you see that Peanut, real quick, Peanut got on the Hall of Fame ballot?
Oh, great. Is he in this year, do you think?
I don't think so, but at least he's on the ballot.
Yeah. This is a first-year ballot for Peanut, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
So,
where's Dan Pompei when we need him?
Exactly. Exactly. If anybody was going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer from that era of Chicago Bears, it should be Peanut and not Brian Urlacher, in my opinion.
I agree, and I still think had he not gotten hurt, Mike Brown would have been a Hall of Famer.
Yep. Absolutely.
I think Mike Brown, he had all those injuries, and the guy had so much heart. I mean, he kept coming back, but if he had been able to stay healthy, that guy would have been a Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm. By the way,
I think the Bears would have won the Super Bowl had that guy been able to be on the field. Of course, he was hurt and missed the game, but I'm just saying, but if the 2004, 2003, 2 version of Mike Brown is playing against the Colts, I don't think we lose.
By the way, I should tell you, you'd be fascinated by some of the conversations that I have with David Schuster, Greg Gabriel, Les Gropsey, and so forth, because these guys have been in locker rooms, and Greg Gabriel, of course, was employed by the Chicago Bears. He was the director of college scouting for the Chicago Bears, so he spent a lot of time interacting with the Bears from the Lovie Smith era, and he's got such fascinating stories about the behavior of some of these guys, and I'm reluctant to share some of them because I don't know if I should or not, because every time he shares these stories, we're not recording at the time, but I will share this one. I think I can get away with this one. Olin Kreutz was one tough son of a bitch, man, and and the reporters will tell you this too. This guy was the bodyguard, the bouncer, I should say, the bouncer of the locker room. He would, the press would be meeting with the players, and they would have 5 minutes left. And Olin would start yelling and turning on and off the lights and saying, "Get the fuck out of here! Get the fuck out of here! Get the fuck out of here!" I mean, this guy was very protective of that, for lack of a better word, that clique of players, and the media were outsiders, and the players, it was a sanctuary for players, and he made sure that he let all the reporters know, you guys are you guys, and we are we. And so very, very fascinating dynamic.
The thing about Olin that sticks out of my head when you said that, it made me think of that Sunday night game when Rex had been out since week 3 of 2004. It's week 15 of 2005. It's really cold. The Falcons are at Soldier Field. And Kyle Lorton is like 2 of 10 in the first half, and they're going to go to Rex in the second half. And Rex he gets 2 standing ovations. But before Grossman comes in the game, on the sideline, ESPN, because back then they had the Sunday night package, they show Muhsin Muhammad just fucking in Kyle Lorton's face, because he had missed him like 5 times.
I remember that, yes.
Yeah, he's talking pure shit to Kyle Lorton, and it's Olin. Olin gets up and basically, tells Muhammad to shut the fuck up and go sit down, and Muhammad says nothing to Olin.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, yeah, I guess he's the Mike Tyson of the group.
Yep. Well, and Greg shared the story about the Fred Brown incident at the FBI headquarters where he punched Brown out. It was Fred Brown. Am I saying the name correctly?
You mean the other lineman?
Yeah.
What was his? He was the guy from Buffalo, right?
Yeah. Reuben Brown.
Reuben Brown.
Reuben. Yeah, I knew when I said Fred, it didn't sound quite right. But Greg shared that story about what actually happened when he punched that out. And that's a fascinating story. I won't get into the details on that one because I think Greg would get angry at me if I shared that. But just Olin Kreutz is a man's man times a million. There's no doubt about it.
And he defended relentlessly since he's been on the score. Every time it would come up in the NFC Championship game, he said that Jay was in the huddle and his fucking leg was involuntarily shaking. He couldn't stop his leg from shaking. He could put no weight on his leg. He came out one possession and tried to play, and like they saw, he couldn't play. And so he has defended Cutler, even though you can tell he's not a Cutler guy per se.
Right.
But for the championship game, he has defended him over and over and over and said that he didn't think that had they gone to the Super Bowl, he didn't think Jay could have played then either.
Yeah.
That's how injured he was.
Yeah. I mean, that was a serious injury. Anyone that doubts that Jay was really injured is an idiot. And
It's just so many people. The Bears failed him. So, like, just come out and say, hey, this guy's really hurt.
Yes.
Tell Joe Buck that. Where's Bears PR tweeting then, you know?
Right, really. And Maurice Jones-Drew.
Fuck him.
Yeah, I mean, that guy, what a despicable human being to say that about a fellow NFL player, to doubt that he could go out there. And any one of the other NFL players, it boggles my mind that these guys who have been, who have played the game of football can doubt the manhood of a fellow player without actually knowing the facts. It just really bugs the hell out of me. By the way, the Cleveland Browns are really annihilating the Bengals now. Kareem Hunt just scored a touchdown, and Kareem Hunt, who was rumored to come to the Chicago Bears because of Matt Nagy's friendship with him, we might still see Kareem Hunt someday in a Chicago Bears uniform.
I got 28-23 now.
I've got Kareem Hunt just scoring a touchdown. I think my feed is a little faster.
Oh,
than yours.
yeah. It's 34-23. It's been updated. Okay.
There you go.
My bad. Hey, I got to go.
I know you got to go. I was like, and we have so much more show to do.
I know. I'm sorry. I got to go and go to my other job and pay the bills. Is it okay? Can we still do like this day in Bears history?
Sure.
I kind of wanted to incorporate that. I wish that we could talk about it more, but you don't even have to play the highlights unless you want to. It's fine. It's 11:27 my time. I got to go around 35.
All right. Well, I won't play the highlights. So why don't we talk about this day in Bears history, because you are so good at that, and this should be a regular feature here at the Barroom Network. Go for it.
Yeah, I'd like for it to be. September the 17th is the day that we're doing this. September the 17th, 20 years ago. September the 17th of 2000. It was week number 3 at Soldier Field. The New York Giants, ironically, were coming to town. The Giants that year would go to the Super Bowl and just be annihilated by the Ravens, and arguably the worst Super Bowl ever played, 35. But it was notable because it was Bobby Ingram's final game as a Bear. He got hurt at one point. The Bears were 0-2 coming into the game. And I remember I still had hope, because the 99 Bears were 6-10, appeared to be on the rise. They used Cade McNown sporadically, mixed him in with Shane Matthews and Jim Miller. And McNown would come in, and he had a 4-touchdown game against Detroit in 99. So it looked like, he did okay in the limited opportunities that he had. So maybe there's hope. Opening day, they go to the Metrodome. They lose 30-27. So again, you're thinking, man, we're close. The next week they go to Tampa. I remember Michael Jordan was at the game, and they lose to Tampa 41-0. And you're thinking, okay, maybe that was just an aberration. You get the doors blown off of you, but how do you respond? And they came back home, because both the week 1 and week 2 are on the road. And here it is, a home opener, week 3, and they're playing the Giants, and they lose 14-7. So they drop to 0-3. And when you drop to 0-3, you know your illusions of being a good team are probably done.
Yes, it's over.
Yeah, and Ingram would be finished. The Bears had 1 touchdown on the play on the game. It was Cade McNown completing a short touchdown to Eddie Kinnison, who only played 1 year with the Bears.
That's right. Thankfully.
Yeah. The Giants, Dixon, I'd forgotten about him. I think he's the guy that scored their only touchdown in the Super Bowl. Could be wrong about that because their only touchdown was a kickoff return.
Yeah. Andre Dixon, right?
Ron Dixon.
Ron, there you go.
Kerry Collins hit him, and it was 7-7, and then Tiki Barber scored late and put the game away, and we lost 14-7. And that was on this day 20 years ago, which, again, is wow. I mean, it's hard. I mean, in one aspect, it's like, yeah, that seems like it should be 20 years ago, but not really in another aspect. And you had John Madden and Pat Summerall doing the game, which always made it feel bigger than maybe what it should have been. But real quick, I'll touch then on the stats. Kerry Collins was a solid 24 of 33 for 251 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks, was sacked 2 times. Cade McNown, 23 of 36, 202 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks, sacked 3 times. He had an 88 rating. He ran 2 times for 4 yards. I mean, so not a bad game from Cade either. Let's see. The Bears gave up 86 yards to Tiki Barber and 69 yards to Thunder Ron Dane. But here goes where we struggled. Curtis Enos had 13 yards rushing. James Allen had 31.
Okay.
So we couldn't run the ball. And keep in mind, we are 2 games away from Urlacher's first start. We're going to lose the next week against the Lions and drop to 0-4. That's going to be a 21-14 loss, which I did not remember the score on that one. I'm cheating on that. But the following week, week 5, they go to Green Bay and they win 27-24. Alex Brown is going to sack Brett Favre at the end. Or not, I'm not Alex Brown. I'm sorry, Philip Daniels, whom we had signed from the Seahawks, I think, as a free agent. But that was Urlacher's first start. So we're 2 weeks away from that in context, and that is 20 years ago. Mike Brown was also a rookie on that team.
All right, before I let you go.
Sure.
This day in history, September 18th, which is...
17th.
No.
Okay.
I'm talking about tomorrow.
Okay, tomorrow.
Which a lot of people will be hearing this on tomorrow, and they'll be listening to this on Friday. And so 2 great events happened on this date for the Chicago Bears. In 1938, the Bears beat the Packers by a score of 2-0. That must have been a great game. And then in 1983, you might have this in your DVD collection. For those who don't know, Dan Aguire has an extensive DVD collection of Chicago Bears games. 1983, the New Orleans Saints win their very first overtime victory by beating the Chicago Bears 34-31. This was a Morton Anderson 41-yard field goal. And the sad part about it was that in the fourth quarter, it was a Walter Payton to Willie Gault touchdown pass. Walter Payton threw the ball 21 yards to Willie Galton to tie the game and force overtime 31-31, but it was Morton Anderson, 41-yard field goal to win the game for the Saints, their very first overtime victory. This day in history, September 18th. So Dan got you September 17th. I got you September 18th. Those of you listening, send us your day in history. And I don't care what you send it to us. Let us know what you think of this show. Dan, I love you. Go to work, make some money, and let's stay in touch this weekend because, before I let you go, who's going to win this week?
I was about to ask you the same thing. It's like, well, what about our predictions? I don't like to get too chesty about anything when it comes to the Bears because we've had so much losing. Even in if I was older in 85, I'd have been like, okay, but shh, don't brag, don't ruin this. 14-2 the next year, we still don't win the Super Bowl. So that's the way I'm afraid. How many 13-3 teams have we had that didn't win the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
01, 06.
Oh my
you get the point.
Yes.
So I don't get too arrogant, but I just have to think that Sunday is our day. Not just out of blindness. It's an opening. I mean, again, you're not going to have the crowd. Greg Braggs isn't going to be there. Maybe Greg will be there. He's like that annoying guy that is always catching the home run balls at the baseball games. I forget that guy's name. Although I'm not saying Greg's annoying. I'm saying he's omnipresent. He's ubiquitous.
That's right. If there's a way for a fan to sneak into Soldier Field and watch that game, Greg will find it.
Exactly. But you'd have to think they're at home. And on paper, they're the better team. I think that I don't know what the spread is. I would imagine the Bears are probably favored by 4 or so.
5.5.
Yeah, so we should win this game. I mean, and then, you got at Atlanta and versus Indianapolis. Everybody was predicting the Colts to do well. It's like, I've seen nothing from Phillip Rivers at this point of his career that scares me. I don't want to say that shit. Then he comes in and beats us 2 years in a row, which would make me like, you big fucking, you blow hard. It's your fault. But, I mean, if you can get this Giant game, maybe you're looking at 4-0. Again, let's just pump the brakes. And then maybe you got the Tom Brady game really meaning something on the Thursday night. But I'll take the Bears. I don't know the score, but I think the Bears. I don't know about the points where I'm not talking about betting money. I'm just saying outright to win. I think the Bears win and they go to 2-0. First time since 2013.
Oh, wow. That's a nice stat to have handy. I crashed the Gabriel Schuster Talk Bears show from Thursday, and I shared my prediction. I said that I think this is going to be a turnover-prone game. Remember that Trubisky threw 2 interceptions in last year's Bears-Giants game. I think he might throw 2 interceptions too, and that one of them could result in a score. But overall, I do believe that the Bears are going to win easily in a very high-scoring affair. At least for the Bears, it could be something like 34-17, something like that. I think that these teams are still kind of in preseason mode, and so that's why I'm predicting the turnover-prone game. And I think that the Bears are the much better team, and so that's why they should win by a couple of touchdowns at least. So we'll see.
I'm a huge critic of Matt Nagy and have been.
I noticed that.
But the Giants, ever since Coughlin left, I'm always like, who's their coach? Like, oh, it's the guy that was in Minnesota. Okay, it's Ben somebody. And then it's like, who is this guy? He was like Belichick's fucking ball washer. He's like the guy that was the assistant to the special teams coach. I don't know who he is.
Joe Judge.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I have more confidence in Matt Nagy than this other guy. Like, I think the Bears win. I don't know who their coach is. Maybe, again, I probably would have said that to about Mike McCarthy in 2006. Who the fuck is this?
Well,
Who's Andy Reid again when the Eagles, they hired the quarterback coach? Mm-hmm. So, again, I've eaten my words before, but who is this guy with New York? I think the Bears are the better staff, the better players, and we should win.
Yes, and that home crowd, right?
Well, that's a good thing, honestly, because
I agree.
I got to go, but like, let's say Mitch did throw a pick six. If the crowd was there, they wouldn't remember the fourth quarter comeback at all in Detroit.
That's right. The TVs will be off at Soldier Field, and Trubisky will be happy about that.
So if Mitch can get a couple of wins behind his back, and maybe the crowd does come back at some point this year, maybe not, but if there's reason to build some momentum to get the people on his side, even when he does make a mistake, that would be significant progress.
You just offered up the thought of the show, and you did it right at the end. You've got to go to work. I love you, Dan Aguire. I love doing the show with you, and I can't wait till next week when we're talking about the Bears being 2-0.
Well, you be well. And to that, the one guy that was complaining on us, we had no sex stories.
Oh my gosh! Well, do you have a couple of minutes? I want to tell you about my masturbation story. No.
Next week, that's a homework assignment. Let's offend that guy. No, I'm kidding. You be well. It was great, and go Bears.
All right, take care, brother.
Yes, sir. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Dan and Aldo Bear Their Soulz. Make sure you subscribe to the Barroom Network and you give us a rating on iTunes. Until next week, my name is Nomfe. Bear down.